My sister has always been manipulative and cruel, yet my parents favored her as their golden child. Eta for showing them her true nature. Lisa, my 18-year-old younger sister, is the real embodiment of evil on earth, in my opinion. I am a 23-year-old woman. I have attempted to persuade my parents to see the truth over the years, but they have never trusted me, until now. For background, I have always had a tense relationship with my parents, mostly because of Lisa. My mother lost a kid due to a miscarriage, which had a profound impact on her, which is why my parents cherish her. A few years later, Lisa was born, and was considered their miracle child, a ray of happiness and optimism that eased the anguish of their earlier loss. My parents made her the center of our family's existence by lavishing her with love and care. To be clear, when we were kids, I adored my younger sister. Simply put, I began to gradually realize that Lisa possessed a remarkable gift for manipulation that none of my relatives could match. She was skilled at playing the victim and knew how to make the scenario work in her favor. Our grandparents once gave me an old pocket watch for my birthday. I was overjoyed that it was a family heirloom. Lisa continued asking me to share it with her, obviously jealous. Since it was a present for me, I declined. She attempted to convince our parents, but they were unable to stop her because it came from our grandparents. Knowing that I was afraid of spiders, Lisa put a house spider inside my pillowcase that night. I shrieked as I woke up from my sleep to the terrifying feeling of a spider crawling across my flesh. Lisa looked astonished and sympathetic as my parents hurried in. She exhibited no remorse, and later, when we were alone, she confessed with a spooky smile that she had placed the spider there to teach me a lesson. I once invited my classmate Mark over to watch a movie since I was crushing on him. To impress him, I got dressed up. Lisa giggled and purposefully spilled juice over my dress when Mark got there. In an attempt to conceal my shame, I had to change. She then wouldn't leave us alone while the movie was playing and started telling Mark embarrassing anecdotes about me as a kid. Lisa grinned and told Mark he could do a lot better than me just as he was ready to go. Mark hurried out, feeling uneasy the whole time. I have warned my parents about Lisa's antics over the years, but they have consistently written it off as her being impressionable and immature. They believed that I was the family's troublemaker. After a while, I stopped whining. While I frequently felt alienated, Lisa continued to be their favorite. I put a lot of effort into my studies, was accepted to a reputable college, and left home. But Lisa always made it plain that she hated having me around when I returned home. She tampered with my possessions, disregarded me, and cut off my conversations with our parents. In an effort to get along, my parents encouraged us to avoid going home during breaks. Instead, my parents didn't appear to object because they believed I was being independent by spending time with my friends' families. Lisa opted for community college after graduating from high school since she lacked the grades necessary for college. As a result, she was never had to leave our parents' home. I currently work in San Francisco for a multinational company, and I truly love what I do. I don't often go home, although I do occasionally communicate with my folks. I have absolutely no communication with Lisa. Let's get to the story. My father suffered a heart attack that almost killed him. Thankfully, he miraculously survived and was taken to a hospital right away. I bought tickets and traveled back home to be there for them as soon as my mother called to inform me about it. In addition to prescribing a number of drugs, the physicians also encouraged my father to begin exercising. My father told me how fortunate he was to have been saved and said he wanted to spend more time with us as a family after being released. I chose to stay at our place for a few days since I could understand his perspective. It wasn't an issue because I have the ability to work remotely at my job. But I could see that my presence was really upsetting Lisa. Since we were both older now and I didn't want to argue after our dad's heart attack, I did my best to stay away from her. Since we hadn't gone anywhere together in a while, my father proposed that we all take a family vacation one morning over breakfast. Despite my initial misgivings, I consented since I understood how important it was to my dad. Lisa, on the other hand, was not happy about it but was forced to follow the plan. All of our travel and lodging arrangements were handled by my father. Since I sincerely wanted to spend time with my parents, I prepared my leave of absence in advance and told my coworkers not to get in touch with me during this period. However, I discovered that my airline ticket had been canceled when we got to the airport. My father asserted that he had purchased and paid for my ticket, and we exchanged perplexed glances. After more research, I discovered that the ticket bearing my name had been inexplicably canceled out of the four. I looked at Lisa as I stood there trying to make sense of what was happening. The devious smirk on her face was one I had seen so many before, the exact expression she would wear after successfully executing one of her cunning ploys. She was the one who had canceled my ticket, most likely from my father's computer, I knew at that same moment. She simply stood there grinning at me when I began to yell at her. Lisa had canceled my ticket since she didn't want me on the family trip in the first place, I told my dad. My mother didn't believe me at all and said, "Your sister would never do something like that." She also accused me of being envious of my younger sister and said that my ticket being canceled was just a random accident. In an attempt to defend it, my father also suggested that I shouldn't hold Lisa responsible and that it might have been an airline error. My parents' inability to believe that their cherished miracle child could be responsible for such dishonesty completely irritated me. But there was nothing I could do now. There were no other flights scheduled for that day, and my ticket had already been canceled. Even though I might be able to get a flight the next day, I didn't look forward to going home, finding a new flight, and going it alone. This was meant to be a family vacation, after all. Additionally, I was terrified of having to stay in the same room as Lisa while on the vacation. Although I had thought she had changed over the years, I couldn't help but wonder what other plans she might have to ruin my vacation if she was responsible for canceling my plane ticket. At first, my father was apprehensive, saying they might all return home and arrange another vacation at a later time. But then he began to talk about how long it had been since he had taken a holiday. According to my mother, I frequently travel for work and wouldn't miss anything if I didn't go. I felt upset by their remarks because they seemed to be gently pressuring me to let them depart without me. They immediately agreed when I informed them they might stay on vacation if they so desired. I was disappointed that they didn't care if I joined them or not, even though I didn't want the money I had paid for the tickets and accommodations to be wasted. It became evident that they had no problem traveling as a family of 3 for the family holiday. Thus, I found myself standing by myself at the airport as my parents and Lisa left for their much-awaited journey. Instead of spending a lonely day at our family home, I made the decision to go back to my home in San Francisco. I made an effort to put the experience behind me and concentrated on making the most of the remainder of my leave. I made the most of my break by reading, reconnecting with old acquaintances, and taking a solo vacay. At times during the trip, my parents would video call me to express how much they were having fun without me. It seemed as though my absence had no bearing whatsoever on their trip. I wasn't devastated that I missed the trip, but I couldn't get rid of the sense of alienation. It was just another example of the favoritism that had always pervaded our family. But it came as a surprise when I wished for my parents to finally see Lisa for who she really was. My mother had left me multiple missed calls when I woke up a few days into their vacation. I called her back right away since I was worried that my father's health would suddenly deteriorate. Fortunately, she answered, although her voice was very upset. She told me that something really upsetting had happened when I asked whether everything was well. It seems that my father's vital cardiac meds were running out every day, and my parents had observed this. This was concerning since, given his precarious condition, my father could not afford to skip his medication. They were unsure if they could locate substitutes because they were in a strange nation. They looked everywhere in their room but couldn't find anything. Then, while using Lisa's hotel room to borrow sunscreen, my mother found all the missing pills hidden on Lisa's bedside table. It was a terrifying revelation. At last, my parents came to the realization that their cherished miracle child had been purposefully endangering and threatening my father's health. When my mother inquired as to whether they ought to speak with Lisa, her voice wavered. I suggested that they hold off until they got home in order to collect their ideas and supporting documentation. It would be pointless to confront Lisa right away because she was a skilled manipulator and would probably make up excuses. But that night, something unexpected occurred. Despite my caution, my parents must have gone up to Lisa. My father called me late at night and told me that Lisa was in jail. His voice was shaking. I was taken aback. He described how Lisa threw a complete fit when they asked her about the drugs. She hurled things, yelled obscenities, and mostly attacked my father, saying he had purchased a ticket for me when he ought never to have permitted me to join them on their family trip. Lisa promised my parents that she would give them a lesson they would never forget if they remained in my company. She snapped, and things quickly got out of hand until someone at the hotel phoned the police. Lisa was taken into custody after she refused to calm down and insulted the officers when they arrived. After a few hours, Lisa was freed, but at that point, my parents were powerless. My parents sought to postpone their flight since they were desperate to get home. But they found that their wallets and passports were gone. It turned out that they were stranded in a distant nation because Lisa had either concealed or thrown away their passports. My parents started to see Lisa for who she truly was for the first time. Having always stood up for Lisa, my mother was suddenly overcome, astonished, and upset at the discovery of her angelic daughter's true identity. They lacked the funds and paperwork to take a plane back, so she called me and begged for assistance. I informed her that they needed to locate their passports before I could transfer funds via Western Union. I was sure Lisa hadn't thrown them away. At last, my parents began to see that I had been telling the truth about Lisa's shenanigans the entire time. Despite not include me in the trip, they expressed regret for their actions and gratitude for my assistance. It was difficult to overlook the years of partiality that had cost me their love, even if I wanted to forgive them. Update 1. My parents contacted with information every day, and I became more and more nervous. My parents threatened to contact the police once more if Lisa didn't return their passports once she was released from jail. Lisa had no choice except to show where she had concealed them. My parents confronted Lisa when they got home and instructed her to gather her things and go. They had finally realized the truth about her destructive and deceptive behavior, and they had finally reached their breaking point. They were concerned that Lisa might steal my father's prescription drugs and jeopardize his health once more. Another yelling match resulted from this altercation. Lisa vented her rage and contempt by making false accusations about my parents. She stated that she felt pushed to the brink when they invited me on the trip and that she didn't want to share them with anybody else. Lisa asserted that she was more than enough for them both and insisted that they disown me. When my parents attempted to reason with her, she continued to accuse them. Lisa became so enraged and desperate that she threatened to tell everyone that they had abused and neglected her when she was a youngster. She intensified her threats, saying that if they persisted in demanding that she leave, she would go to the police and make false allegations against them. My parents were really concerned by these threats since they are well-respected physicians in the neighborhood and such accusations could damage their reputation. Since then, Lisa has persisted in making my parents' lives challenging. Lisa became enraged and began smashing things when she found out they were talking to me on a regular basis. To make matters worse, she continues taking my parents' car keys and concealing them, which makes it difficult for them to get to work each day. My mother phoned me crying just tonight following yet another unfortunate event. Lisa wanted my mother to prepare dinner for her, so she threw a fit and yelled. Lisa went on a frenzy and broke furniture all around the home when my mother refused, claiming she was exhausted from work. Then, in order to keep our parents from sleeping, she withdrew to her room and turned up the music. My parents are suffering greatly emotionally and mentally as a result of the situation, which is getting worse. Although I had hoped they would realize Lisa's true character, I now fear she could actually endanger them. I can't even go back home because I could set her off even more, which would result in more violent altercations. I'm making every effort to get my parents to seek legal advice in order to resolve this recurring issue once and for all. The greatest option to safeguard my parents and bring harmony back to our family seems to be through the legal system. Update 2. As many of you anticipated, Lisa has been arrested. This was an unavoidable result of her growing shenanigans. She attacked our parents with a knife one evening following a furious dispute. They had to call the police because they were so terrified. Lisa was quickly arrested by officers on assault allegations. My parents felt it was time to look for a long-term solution while Lisa was in custody. They sought advice from a lawyer, who helped them navigate the court system in order to remove Lisa from their house. Lisa had to vacate, according to a legal eviction notice they issued. Even if they found this decision difficult, it was essential to protect them. My parents only wanted her out of their house and didn't want to file any more charges. They gave her a written notice outlining all the legal specifics of why and when she had to leave, and they also bailed her out of jail. After that, they went to court with their attorney to start the eviction procedure, which involved suing Lisa. My parents were devastated by this development and felt terrible remorse for bringing their own daughter to court. But they knew there was nothing else they could do. After a while, the court formally ordered Lisa to vacate the house. They would be legally allowed to take her off the property if she didn't go voluntarily. By next week, Lisa should be gone. Now that they've taken a step toward taking back their house and their tranquility, my folks are finally beginning to exhale with relief. Although it has been a difficult trip, they are optimistic that after Lisa leaves, things will get better. Throughout this trauma, I have maintained a tight relationship with them, and I intend to take them to San Francisco for a few weeks. After everything they've been through, it will provide them with a much-needed respite and an opportunity to unwind. I'm excited to get to know them better and help them in any way that I can. Update 3. Reading through the hundreds of comments that have been left on my post has taken some time. Many of you recommended that we think about having Lisa assessed to see if there may be a mental health problem at work. The problem is that we cannot make Lisa go for a checkup against her will because she is an adult. We don't want to push her and add to the already complex scenario because of her violent outbursts. My parents went down to San Francisco to be with me for a few days, as I mentioned in my previous report. After everything they had been through in the past few months, they wanted a break. My parents started talking to me yesterday evening as we sat around the dining table in my comfortable apartment. Their words were filled with remorse and humility. They pleaded for my forgiveness, acknowledging that they had been unaware of Lisa's actual character for so long. My father apologized for not paying attention to my earlier warnings. He acknowledged that they were blind to the reality behind Lisa's endearing facade and never anticipated her to turn out this way. My mother agreed with my father and recognized the seriousness of their error in ignoring my worries about Lisa's actions throughout the years. As she expressed the anguish of learning how they had let me down by preferring Lisa, her voice faltered. I told them how much I valued their initiative in asking for my pardon. I talked about a number of distressing memories of the years of suffering I went through because of Lisa's behavior. When my parents heard what I had gone through on my own, they were completely taken aback and appalled. They apologized for the loneliness I had inside my own family and acknowledged the suffering I had endured. Since they never anticipated being pregnant with Lisa and always thought of her as their miracle child, my parents described how their partiality for her had influenced their decisions. Their voices were earnest as they pleaded for my pardon for all those years. I had always desired their recognition, therefore it was a moment of mixed emotions for me. It was a turning point that gave our family dynamic much-needed honesty and clarity, even though it might not have been the best approach to patch things up. We were now recognizing the problems that had afflicted our family for the first time in years. We all decided to work through this together after I informed them that it would take some time to regain their trust. As of right now, I want to enjoy every moment of my family's visit to me during the next few days. Update 4. My parents and I spent more time together as the days went by, taking leisurely dinners, visiting the lively streets of San Francisco, and just enjoying one another's company. Rebuilding the relationships that had been damaged by years of partiality and denial has been quite the struggle. I realized that their choice to turn to me for comfort was motivated by more than simply putting physical distance between them and Lisa. It was also a desire to reunite the family they had nearly lost. Like them, I needed a new beginning. Since then, my parents and I have spoken about what to do with Lisa. At the moment, she is lodging at a friend's house. Despite the chaos she has brought into our life, we cannot just leave her. Even if their daughter's conduct have been terrible, my parents feel a strong sense of duty to her as parents. We've accepted the possibility that her actions could point to more serious problems than simple purposeful mischief. To learn more about her situation, we intend to investigate the possibility of a mental health evaluation. Since Lisa is an adult, we are unable to coerce her into undergoing such an evaluation. Instead, we must devise a strategy to motivate her to freely seek assistance. When they return home, my parents want to get in touch with Lisa to see if she's willing to have a conversation. She still has a lot of anger toward me, therefore I don't want to get in touch with her because I don't want to make things worse for her mental health. Given her history of violence and hostility, I have urged my parents to meet her in a public setting to make her learn to regulate her emotions. We want Lisa to understand our point of view and, above all, to understand how much we care and love her. This is about resolving the problems that have caused tension in our relationships as a family, not about placing blame. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you. I sued my parents and received a $1,200,000 settlement for years of favoritism toward my older sister, which deeply affected my life. I sued my parents for manipulating my golden sister and received a settlement of $1,200,000. Growing up, I always felt like I lived in the shadow of my older sister, Elizabeth. She was 3 years older than me, and from the moment I was old enough to notice, it was clear she was the star of our family. My parents, John and Margaret, were well off and well respected in our community. My father ran a thriving real estate business, and my mother, a retired concert pianist, devoted her time to social events and managing our home. From the outside, we looked like the perfect family, but inside, it was a different story. Elizabeth was their golden child, and everything about her life reflected that. She was brilliant, charismatic, and excelled at everything she tried, whether it was academics, sports, or music. She outshone everyone, including me. My parents adored her, showering her with praise and attention. Every milestone she reached was celebrated like a major event, complete with elaborate parties and expensive gifts. I was there too, of course, but more as a background character. My own accomplishments, modest as they were, barely registered. It wasn't that I wasn't trying. I did well enough in school and stayed out of trouble, but I didn't shine like Elizabeth. The difference in how we were treated became painfully clear over the years. One Christmas stands out in my mind. I was 8, and Elizabeth was 11. My parents had gone all out with the presents that year. The living room was piled high with gifts, but the centerpiece was a grand piano gleaming under the Christmas lights. Elizabeth had been begging for it for months, and my mother, who still missed her own days as a pianist, had finally caved. They were ecstatic as they unveiled it, going on and on about how Elizabeth would carry on the family tradition. When it was my turn, my dad handed me a small box. Inside was a sketch pad and a set of crayons. "We thought you might like to draw," he said with a smile. I tried to act grateful, but the message was clear. Elizabeth was the star, and I was just there. Things didn't improve as we got older. In school, Elizabeth continued to dominate. She was class president, captain of the cheerleading squad, and eventually valedictorian. Everyone loved her. Teachers sang her praises, and her peers either idolized her or envied her. Meanwhile, I struggled to find my place. I had a small group of friends, nerdy kids like me who loved video games and comic books, but I was invisible to most of the school. I wasn't bullied exactly, but I wasn't noticed either. One of the most humiliating moments of my childhood happened during a school talent show. I had decided to perform a magic act, something I'd been practicing for weeks. Elizabeth was also in the show, playing a piano piece she had mastered in a matter of days. She went first, and of course, the audience went wild. Her performance was flawless, and she got a standing ovation. Then it was my turn. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped one of my props. A few kids in the audience laughed, and I could feel my face burning. I stumbled through the rest of my act, desperate to just get it over with. Afterward, my parents gave me a half-hearted good job, but their attention quickly shifted back to Elizabeth, who was basking in her glory. Elizabeth wasn't deliberately cruel, at least not usually. After the talent show, she came up to me with that insufferable smile of hers and said, "You were great, Jackson. It's so brave of you to try." Her words stung, not because they were mean, but because they felt so condescending. I hated that I cared so much about her opinion. As we moved into our teenage years, favoritism became impossible to ignore. My parents poured resources into Elizabeth's future, paying for private tutors, expensive summer programs, and any extracurricular activity she showed interest in. I got none of that. When I asked if I could take art classes, my dad shrugged and said, "Maybe next year." A promise that never materialized. Elizabeth's charm extended to the rest of the family as well. Our relatives adored her. Family gatherings turned into endless cycles of "Elizabeth is so talented," and "Elizabeth is going to do great things." I often wondered if they even remembered my name. At one Thanksgiving dinner, my aunt turned to me and said, "You must be so proud of your sister." I nodded, biting back the urge to say, "And what about me?" Even as I tried to carve out a path for myself, it felt like Elizabeth was always one step ahead, effortlessly overshadowing me. She didn't just succeed, she excelled. And she did it with an ease that made my own struggles seem pitiful in comparison. I began to resent her, not just for how she was treated, but for how she made me feel about myself. My parents' favoritism wasn't just about praise or attention, it had real consequences. When Elizabeth turned 16, my dad surprised her with a brand new car, a sleek red convertible. She squealed with delight, hugging him and gushing about how it was the best day of her life. 2 years later, when I turned 16, I got the keys to our old family sedan, a beat-up station wagon with a busted radio and a sagging roofliner. "It's still a good car," my dad said, as if that made it any less humiliating. Elizabeth went off to an Ivy League university, her tuition fully covered by my parents, who couldn't stop bragging about their brilliant daughter. I, on the other hand, ended up at a state school, working part-time jobs to cover what my partial scholarship didn't. My parents didn't even bother to visit when I moved into my dorm. They were too busy helping Elizabeth set up her new apartment near campus. By the time I graduated, the resentment I felt toward Elizabeth and my parents had hardened into something deeper. I knew it wasn't healthy, but I couldn't help it. Every time I saw her with her perfect life and her endless string of successes, it felt like a reminder of everything I wasn't. The first time Elizabeth referred to me as her backup plan, it was meant as a joke, or at least that's how she sold it. It was during one of those rare family dinners where everyone pretended we were closer than we really were. Elizabeth was home for the weekend with her fiancé, Ryan, a stockbroker with the personality of a cardboard box but a bank account big enough to make my parents fawn over him. We were sitting around the dining table, halfway through dessert, when Elizabeth casually leaned back in her chair and said, "Well, if Ryan ever dumps me, at least I know Jackson will always be single and available." The room erupted into laughter, but I just sat there, stunned. It wasn't the kind of joke you expect to hear from your sister, especially not in front of your fiancé, Amelia, who had been sitting quietly beside me. Amelia gave me a small, uncomfortable smile, the kind that said she was trying not to make a scene but didn't find it funny either. Later that night, as we were driving home, Amelia finally said, "Does she always talk to you like that?" Her tone was neutral, but I could tell she was bothered. Elizabeth is Elizabeth, I replied, trying to brush it off. She thinks she's being funny. Amelia didn't push it further, but I could see the question lingering in her eyes. She didn't need to say it out loud. I was already asking myself the same thing. Over the next few months, Elizabeth's jokes became a recurring theme. She'd bring it up at the most inappropriate times, always with that same smug smile, as if she enjoyed watching me squirm. At first, I tried to laugh it off, but it was hard not to take it personally. It didn't help that Ryan found it hilarious. Hey, at least you've got a backup plan, buddy, he said once, clapping me on the shoulder. I wanted to punch him in his perfectly chiseled face. Amelia, however, wasn't amused. During one family barbecue, Elizabeth made her usual comment, something along the lines of, "Don't get too comfortable, Ryan. Jackson's been waiting in the wings his whole life." This time, Amelia didn't hold back. "That's incredibly disrespectful," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Jackson isn't anyone's backup plan." The laughter stopped. Elizabeth's face froze for a moment, then twisted into a patronizing smile. "Oh, come on, Amelia. It's just a joke. Don't take it so seriously." "I'm not sure why you think that's funny," Amelia shot back. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. My parents exchanged uncomfortable glances, but no one said anything to Elizabeth. They never did. The drive home that night was silent. I could tell Amelia was furious, but she waited until we were in the privacy of our apartment to let it out. "You need to stand up to her, Jackson," she said, pacing the living room. "This isn't okay. She's treating you like a doormat, and you're letting her." "I know," I muttered, rubbing my temples. "But what am I supposed to do? She's always been like this. If I say anything, it'll just make things worse." "It's already worse," Amelia snapped. "She's undermining you in front of everyone, and your parents just sit there like it's normal." "It's not normal, Jackson. It's toxic." Amelia was right, of course, but knowing that didn't make it any easier. Confronting Elizabeth felt impossible. She was so good at twisting words and making herself look like the victim. I'd seen her do it 100 times before. Things reached a boiling point a few weeks later at another family gathering. This time, it was my parents' anniversary party, a lavish affair at a fancy restaurant. Elizabeth, as usual, was the center of attention, holding court with Ryan at her side. Amelia and I tried to stay in the background, but Elizabeth wouldn't let us. Halfway through the evening, she raised her glass and said, "Let's toast to my amazing little brother Jackson. He's always been there for me, and I know he always will be, my reliable backup plan." The room went silent. Everyone turned to look at me, waiting to see how I'd react. Amelia's hand tightened on my arm, a silent plea for me to say something. My heart was pounding, but I forced myself to stand up. "Elizabeth," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "I don't know what your problem is, but I'm not your backup plan. I'm not your safety net, and I'm not going to sit here and let you treat me like a joke anymore." The words hung in the air like a challenge. For a moment, Elizabeth looked genuinely surprised, but then her expression hardened. "Wow, Jackson," she said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Someone's a little sensitive tonight." "I'm not sensitive," I shot back. "I'm tired. Tired of you belittling me every chance you get. It's not funny, and it's not okay." To my surprise, a few people at the table nodded in agreement. Even Ryan looked uncomfortable, but my parents predictably tried to smooth things over. "Let's not ruin the evening," my mom said, her voice tight. "Elizabeth didn't mean anything by it." "Yes, she did," I replied. "And you've let her get away with it for years." That was the moment I realized just how deep the dysfunction ran. My parents weren't going to change. Elizabeth wasn't going to change. The only thing I could change was how I responded to it. Amelia was proud of me for standing up to Elizabeth, but the fallout wasn't pretty. Elizabeth stopped speaking to me for weeks, which honestly felt more like a blessing than a punishment. My parents tried to guilt trip me into apologizing, saying I'd overreacted and ruined the party, but I didn't budge. For the first time in my life, I put my own feelings above keeping the peace, and it felt liberating. Of course, Elizabeth didn't stay quiet for long. When she finally did reach out, it was under the guise of clearing the air, but it quickly became clear she had no intention of apologizing. Instead, she doubled down, claiming I had misinterpreted her jokes and accusing Amelia of turning me against her. That conversation ended with me hanging up the phone, something I'd never dared to do before. It was a small act of defiance, but it felt monumental. For the first time, I wasn't just Elizabeth's overshadowed little brother. I was my own person, and I wasn't going to let her or anyone else treat me like anything less. The family dinner started like any other. Tense, formal, and pretending to be something it wasn't. My parents had invited us all over for a special evening, a phrase that always made me suspicious. Elizabeth arrived late, as usual, sweeping into the room with Ryan at her side and an air of self-importance that was impossible to ignore. Amelia and I were already seated, making polite conversation with my parents, John and Margaret, and a few extended family members. Aunt Linda, Uncle Robert, and my cousin Claire, who always seemed like she wanted to be anywhere but with us. Elizabeth barely glanced at me as she made her grand entrance, throwing her arms around my mother and exclaiming, "You look amazing, Mom! Did you lose weight?" Her charm was always dialed to maximum in these settings, and my parents lapped it up like thirsty dogs. Ryan followed behind, carrying a bottle of wine that he presented to my father like it was a peace offering. "Thought this might pair well with dinner," he said, his smile as practiced as Elizabeth's. Amelia, seated beside me, squeezed my hand under the table. She hated these dinners as much as I did, but she came anyway, trying to be supportive. I appreciated her more than I could say, especially on nights like this. The meal started without much drama, the conversation staying light and focused on Elizabeth's latest achievements. She had recently been promoted at work and couldn't stop talking about how her boss had personally requested her for a high-profile project. My parents hung on her every word, nodding and smiling like proud parents at a recital. "And what about you, Jackson?" Elizabeth said suddenly, turning her attention to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "What have you been up to?" The question was a trap. It always was. She didn't actually care about the answer. It was just a way to remind everyone that whatever I said would pale in comparison to her latest triumph. "Work's been good," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "Busy, but good." Elizabeth raised an eyebrow. "That's it? No big promotions? No exciting news?" "I'm happy with where I am," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Amelia's grip on my hand tightened. Elizabeth smirked and leaned back in her chair. "Well, as long as you're happy, I guess that's what matters." The comment stung, but I let it slide. I had learned over the years that confronting Elizabeth in front of our parents was a losing battle. They always took her side, no matter what. But tonight, I wasn't sure I could keep biting my tongue. The turning point came during dessert. My mother had baked her famous apple pie, a recipe she'd passed down from her grandmother. The conversation had shifted to family traditions, and Elizabeth naturally had taken center stage. "You know," she said, her voice dripping with fake nostalgia, "it's funny how family dynamics change over time. I mean, I'll always be the overachiever, and Jackson will always be." She trailed off, waving her fork in my direction. "Elizabeth," Amelia said sharply, breaking the awkward silence that followed. "That's enough." Elizabeth blinked, feigning innocence. "What?" "I'm just saying we all have our roles. Jackson's always been the quiet one, the dependable one. My backup plan, as I like to call him." She laughed as if that made it better. Something inside me snapped. I pushed my chair back and stood up, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. "Do you have any idea how offensive that is?" I said, my voice louder than I intended. "You've been making these comments for years, and I've had enough. I'm not your backup plan, Elizabeth. I'm not your safety net, and I'm not going to let you keep treating me like this." The room went dead silent. My father set down his fork, his expression darkening. My mother looked as though I had just slapped her. Elizabeth, meanwhile, looked more amused than anything else. "Oh, come on, Jackson," she said, rolling her eyes. "You're overreacting. It's a joke." "It's not a joke," I shot back. "It's degrading, and you know it. You use these jokes to belittle me and make yourself feel superior." My father's voice cut through the tension like a knife. "That's enough, Jackson. Sit down." I turned to him, incredulous. "Are you serious? She's been insulting me for years, and you've never said a word. But the moment I stand up for myself, I'm the problem?" "Elizabeth didn't mean anything by it," my mother said, her voice tight. "You're making a scene over nothing." "Nothing?" I said, my voice shaking. "This isn't nothing. She's been undermining me my whole life, and you've let her. You've encouraged it." "Jackson," my father said, his tone warning. "You're out of line." I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. "Out of line? Do you even hear yourselves? You've spent my entire life making me feel like I don't matter, like I'll never be good enough compared to her. And now, when I finally speak up, you're telling me to shut up and take it?" Elizabeth leaned back in her chair, sipping her wine like this was some kind of soap opera she was enjoying. "Honestly, Jackson," she said, "you're being so dramatic. If you can't handle a little teasing, maybe you should work on your self-esteem." Amelia stood up then, her face red with anger. "You're unbelievable," she said, glaring at Elizabeth. You talk about Jackson like he's some second-rate backup, but he's twice the person you'll ever be. And you, she added, turning to my parents, should be ashamed of yourselves for enabling this. My mother gasped, as if Amelia had just insulted the Queen. How dare you speak to us like that? How dare you treat your son like this? Amelia shot back. You don't even see how toxic this family dynamic is, do you? The argument escalated from there, voices overlapping as years of resentment and unspoken grievances spilled out into the open. I don't know how long it went on, but by the time it was over, I felt drained, as if I'd run a marathon. I'm happy with where I am, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Amelia's grip on my hand tightened. Elizabeth smirked and leaned back in her chair. Well, as long as you're happy, I guess that's what matters. The comment stung, but I let it slide. I had learned over the years that confronting Elizabeth in front of our parents was a losing battle. They always took her side, no matter what. But tonight, I wasn't sure I could keep biting my tongue. The turning point came during dessert. My mother had baked her famous apple pie, a recipe she'd passed down from her grandmother. The conversation had shifted to family traditions, and Elizabeth naturally had taken center stage. You know, she said, her voice dripping with fake nostalgia. It's funny how family dynamics change over time. I mean, I'll always be the overachiever, and Jackson will always be. She trailed off, waving her fork in my direction. Elizabeth, Amelia said sharply, breaking the awkward silence that followed. That's enough. Elizabeth blinked, feigning innocence. What? I'm just saying we all have our roles. Jackson's always been the quiet one, the dependable one. My backup plan, as I like to call him. She laughed as if that made it better. Something inside me snapped. I pushed my chair back and stood up, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. Do you have any idea how offensive that is? I said, my voice louder than I intended. You've been making these comments for years, and I've had enough. I'm not your backup plan, Elizabeth. I'm not your safety net, and I'm not going to let you keep treating me like this. The room went dead silent. My father set down his fork, his expression darkening. My mother looked as though I had just slapped her. Elizabeth, meanwhile, looked more amused than anything else. Oh, come on, Jackson, she said, rolling her eyes. You're overreacting. It's a joke. It's not a joke, I shot back. It's degrading, and you know it. You use these jokes to belittle me and make yourself feel superior. My father's voice cut through the tension like a knife. That's enough, Jackson. Sit down. I turned to him, incredulous. Are you serious? She's been insulting me for years, and you've never said a word. But the moment I stand up for myself, I'm the problem? Elizabeth didn't mean anything by it, my mother said, her voice tight. You're making a scene over nothing. Nothing? I said, my voice shaking. This isn't nothing. She's been undermining me my whole life, and you've let her. You've encouraged it. Jackson, my father said, his tone warning. You're out of line. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. Out of line? Do you even hear yourselves? You've spent my entire life making me feel like I don't matter, like I'll never be good enough compared to her. And now, when I finally speak up, you're telling me to shut up and take it? Elizabeth leaned back in her chair, sipping her wine like this was some kind of soap opera she was enjoying. Honestly, Jackson, she said, you're being so dramatic. If you can't handle a little teasing, maybe you should work on your self-esteem. Amelia stood up then, her face red with anger. You're unbelievable, she said, glaring at Elizabeth. You talk about Jackson like he's some second-rate backup, but he's twice the person you'll ever be. And you, she added, turning to my parents, should be ashamed of yourselves for enabling this. My mother gasped, as if Amelia had just insulted the Queen. How dare you speak to us like that? How dare you treat your son like this? Amelia shot back. You don't even see how toxic this family dynamic is, do you? The argument escalated from there, voices overlapping as years of resentment and unspoken grievances spilled out into the open. I don't know how long it went on, but by the time it was over, I felt drained, as if I'd run a marathon. My parents didn't speak to me as Amelia and I gathered our things and left. Elizabeth, of course, had the last word. Well, I guess some people just can't handle the truth, she said with a smirk as we walked out the door. In the car, Amelia reached over and took my hand. You did the right thing, she said softly. I'm proud of you. I nodded, though I didn't feel proud. I felt exhausted, angry, and deeply hurt. But for the first time in my life, I had stood up for myself, and that had to count for something. The drive home from that disastrous dinner was silent for a while, the only sound coming from the hum of the engine. Amelia sat beside me, her arms crossed tightly, her face a storm of emotions. I could feel the anger radiating off her, but beneath it, there was something else, concern for me. Finally, she broke the silence. "You can't keep doing this, Jackson." I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. "I know." "No," she said, her voice firmer now. "I don't think you do. Tonight wasn't just another bad dinner, it was a wake-up call. Your family doesn't respect you. They don't care about your feelings, and they never will unless you set boundaries." She was right, of course, but the thought of distancing myself from my family felt like tearing off a piece of myself. As toxic as they were still my parents, still my sister. The idea of walking away felt both terrifying and freeing. We got home, and as I dropped my keys on the counter, Amelia turned to me, her eyes softening. "You deserve better than this, Jackson. You've worked hard for everything you have, and you can't let them keep taking from you, emotionally or otherwise." That last part hit me like a brick. Amelia had brought up concerns about my family's financial ties to me before, especially after I started making a decent living. My parents had a habit of borrowing money that was never repaid, and Elizabeth, ever the opportunist, had hinted more than once about how I could help her out if she and Ryan ever hit a rough patch. I had always brushed it off, thinking it was just family dynamics, but now it felt like another layer of manipulation. "I need to think about this," I said finally, my voice heavy. Amelia nodded. "Take your time, but don't let them guilt you into staying in this cycle." The next day, I called my friend and coworker Adam. Adam was a sharp, no-nonsense lawyer who had helped me out with a few contracts at work. If anyone could give me sound advice, it was him. We met for coffee at a quiet cafe downtown. As I laid out the situation, Adam listened intently, his expression unreadable. "First off," he said when I finished, "you need to protect yourself. If your family has access to any of your accounts, cut that off immediately. And if you're serious about setting boundaries, you might need to consider more than just limiting contact. You might need to get legal protection." "Legal protection?" I asked, my stomach sinking. Adam nodded. "Look, I'm not saying they're going to sue you or anything, but if your parents or sister feel entitled to your money or anything else, you need to make sure they can't take advantage of you. That means reviewing your assets, setting up trusts if necessary, and maybe even writing a formal letter making your boundaries clear." The thought of it all made my head spin, but I knew he was right. My family had shown time and time again that they didn't respect me, and if I didn't take action, I'd only have myself to blame when things got worse. Over the next few weeks, I began the process of disentangling myself from my family's financial reach. I closed joint accounts my parents had access to, updated the beneficiaries on my insurance policies, and even had Adam draft a will that explicitly stated how my assets would be handled. It felt surreal, like I was preparing for some kind of war, but it was also empowering. Amelia was my rock through it all. She encouraged me every step of the way, reminding me that I wasn't doing this out of spite but to protect myself. "This isn't about hurting them," she said one night as we reviewed the documents Adam had prepared. "It's about making sure they can't hurt you anymore." The real test came when my parents called a week later. My mother's voice was sugary sweet as she asked if I'd like to come over for dinner to smooth things over. I could hear Elizabeth in the background, laughing about something with Ryan. The image of them sitting there, planning their next subtle dig at my expense, made my stomach turn. "I'm sorry, Mom," I said, keeping my voice steady. "But I think it's best if I take some time away from the family for now." There was a pause, and then her tone shifted. "Jackson, don't be ridiculous, we're family. We need to stick together." "Family doesn't mean I have to tolerate being disrespected," I said, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. "I need to do this for my own well-being." She sighed heavily, the kind of sigh that was meant to convey disappointment. "Fine, if that's how you feel." It wasn't long before the guilt tripping began. Over the next few days, I received a string of messages from both my parents and Elizabeth. My dad kept it short and gruff, accusing me of overreacting and telling me to man up. Elizabeth, predictably, made it all about herself, sending texts like, "I can't believe you'd cut us off like this after everything I've done for you." But the one that hit the hardest was from my mother. "I just want you to know how much this is hurting us. We've always loved you, Jackson, even if you can't see it." I almost caved after that one. Almost. But Amelia was there, reminding me of why I had made this decision in the first place. "Love doesn't look like manipulation," she said gently. "And if they really love you, they'll respect your need for space." As time went on, the messages tapered off. My parents stopped calling, and Elizabeth moved on to other targets for her attention. It was a strange feeling, Being free from their constant judgment and demands. Lonely at times, yes, but also liberating. I focused on my work, my relationship with Amelia, and rebuilding my sense of self-worth. For the first time in my life, I wasn't living in Elizabeth's shadow or bending over backward to please my parents. I was just me, and it felt good. But even as I started to heal, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. My family wasn't the type to let things go quietly, and I had a sinking suspicion that my decision to set boundaries would come with consequences I hadn't yet anticipated. The first sign that things were escalating came in the form of a voicemail from my mother. It was late on a Tuesday night when I saw her name flash on my phone screen. I let it go to voicemail, not ready to dive back into the family drama just yet, but the message she left was hard to ignore. "Jackson," she began, her tone clipped and formal, the kind she used when she was holding back anger. "Your father and I have been talking, and we feel it's time to discuss the family inheritance. There are some things you need to understand about how we've planned for the future. Call me back as soon as you can." Inheritance. The word sent a chill down my spine. I'd always suspected my parents would use it as a tool to manipulate me, and now it seemed that suspicion was coming true. I replayed the voicemail for Amelia later that evening, pacing the living room as I spoke. "This is them trying to reel me back in," I said, frustration bubbling under the surface. "They can't stand that I've set boundaries, so now they're dangling the inheritance in front of me like a carrot on a stick." Amelia frowned, her arms crossed as she leaned against the kitchen counter. "You don't even care about the inheritance, do you?" "Not really," I admitted. "But it's the principle of it. They're trying to control me again, and I'm not sure how to handle it." "Don't play their game," she said firmly. "If you call her back, they'll just use it as an opportunity to guilt trip you. Stick to your boundaries." I knew she was right, but the thought of ignoring the call entirely felt wrong. So the next morning, I texted my mother instead. "I got your message. I'm not interested in discussing inheritance right now. I'll reach out when I'm ready." Her response came almost immediately. "That's not how this works, Jackson. This is a family matter, and you need to be part of the conversation." I didn't reply. Over the next few days, the messages continued. My father chimed in as well, sending curt texts about responsibility and respect for the family legacy. I tried to ignore them, but it was exhausting, like fighting a battle I hadn't signed up for. Then, out of nowhere, Elizabeth entered the fray. She showed up at my office unannounced, striding in like she owned the place. My coworkers exchanged awkward glances as she swept past them to my desk. "Jackson," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "We need to talk." I gestured for her to follow me into the conference room, not wanting to make a scene. Once the door was closed, I turned to her, arms crossed. "What are you doing here, Elizabeth?" She smiled, but it was the kind of smile that made my stomach churn. "I'm here because Mom and Dad are worried about you. They say you're refusing to discuss the inheritance." "I'm not refusing," I said evenly. "I'm just not interested right now." "Well, you should be," she said, her tone sharpening. "This isn't just about you, Jackson. It's about the entire family. Mom and Dad have worked hard to build this, and you're acting like a spoiled child by ignoring them." I clenched my jaw, trying to keep my composure. "Elizabeth, if you come here to lecture me, you can leave. I've made my decision." Her smile faltered, and for a moment, I saw a flash of something behind her eyes. Anger, maybe, or frustration? But she recovered quickly. "Fine," she said, turning to leave. "But don't say I didn't warn you when this all blows up in your face." The encounter left me rattled. Elizabeth's sudden involvement felt calculated, like she was trying to position herself as the savior of the family while painting me as the black sheep. And it wasn't long before I found out just how far she was willing to go. A few weeks later, I got a call from Adam, my lawyer friend. "Jackson," he said, his voice urgent. "I found something you need to see." He sent me an email with an attachment, a financial statement linked to a bank account in Elizabeth's name. The balance was staggering, over $600,000. But what caught my attention was the list of deposits, all marked as transfers from my parents. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. "This can't be real," I muttered. "It's real," Adam said. I double-checked. "Your parents have been funneling money into this account for years, probably under the guise of helping her with expenses." "Why would they do this?" I asked, though the answer was already forming in my mind. Elizabeth was their golden child, the one who could do no wrong. Of course they'd bankroll her life while leaving me to fend for myself. "You need to confront them about this," Adam said. "And you might want to consider taking legal action to protect yourself." This kind of favoritism could have serious implications for the inheritance or anything else they might try to manipulate you with. The thought of confronting my parents or Elizabeth about this made my stomach turn, but I knew Adam was right. I couldn't let this go unchecked. That weekend, I invited my parents over to my apartment. Amelia was there for support, her presence a steadying force as I prepared for what I knew would be an explosive conversation. When my parents arrived, they were all smiles, as if nothing was wrong. But their expressions changed the moment I brought up the bank account. "I know about the money you've been giving Elizabeth," I said, my voice calm but firm. "Over $600,000. Care to explain?" My mother's face turned pale, while my father's jaw tightened. "That's none of your business," he said gruffly. "It is my business," I shot back. "Because it's a blatant example of how you've always favored her over me. And now you're trying to use the inheritance to manipulate me. I'm done with it." My mother tried to placate me, her voice trembling. "Jackson, we did what we thought was best. Elizabeth needed help." "She needed help?" I interrupted, my anger boiling over. "While I've been working my ass off to make ends meet, you've been handing her hundreds of thousands of dollars. Do you even hear how ridiculous that sounds?" The argument escalated from there, voices rising as years of resentment came to the surface. My father accused me of being ungrateful, while my mother pleaded for me to see reason. But I wasn't backing down. "You've always put Elizabeth first," I said, my voice shaking. "And I'm done pretending that's okay. If you want to continue this dynamic, fine. But I won't be part of it anymore." The conversation ended with my parents storming out, my mother in tears and my father muttering something about family loyalty. Amelia hugged me tightly as the door closed behind them, her support the only thing keeping me grounded. For the first time, I felt like I had truly taken a stand. It wasn't easy, and I knew there would be fallout, but I also knew it was the only way to reclaim my life. The decision to take legal action against my parents wasn't one I made lightly. For weeks after discovering Elizabeth's secret bank account, I wrestled with the implications of what it meant to sue my own family. But the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. This wasn't just about the money. It was about standing up for myself and finally breaking free from the toxic grip my family had on me. Amelia supported me from the beginning, though she made it clear it was my decision to make. "Whatever you decide, I'm with you," she said one night as we sat on the couch, the glow of the TV illuminating her determined expression. "But if you go through with this, you need to be prepared for how ugly it might get." She wasn't wrong. I knew my parents wouldn't take this lying down, and Elizabeth would undoubtedly make it her mission to turn the situation to her advantage. But I also knew I couldn't let fear hold me back any longer. The first step was consulting with Adam, my lawyer friend. He recommended bringing in a specialist, someone with experience in family financial disputes. That's how I met Lauren Green, a sharp and no-nonsense attorney who had a reputation for handling complex cases with precision. Lauren didn't sugarcoat anything during our first meeting. "This is going to be messy," she said, her piercing blue eyes locked on mine. "But based on what you've told me and the evidence you've provided, you have a solid case. If we can prove financial manipulation and favoritism that's impacted your inheritance or financial stability, we can argue for compensation." We began building the case, combing through years of financial records, emails, and text messages. Adam helped me track down additional documentation, including statements from family members who had witnessed the blatant favoritism over the years. My cousin Claire, who had always been quietly supportive, agreed to testify. "I've seen how they treat you, Jackson," she said over the phone. "It's not right, and it's about time someone called them out on it." The hardest part was revisiting all the moments that had led to this point. Every slight, every insult, every time I was made to feel like I wasn't enough, it all came rushing back as I pieced together the timeline of my family's dysfunction. But with each new piece of evidence, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about setting a precedent, about showing that people couldn't get away with treating others like this, even if they were family. When the lawsuit was officially filed, the fallout was immediate. My parents were furious, of course, but their anger was eclipsed by their disbelief. They genuinely seemed to think I wouldn't have the nerve to go through with it. My father called me the day after the filing, his voice cold and clipped. "You're making a mistake, Jackson," he said. "You're going to regret this." "I think the only mistake I've made is letting this go on for as long as it has," I replied, my voice steady despite the knot in my stomach. "This isn't about revenge, Dad. It's about justice." Elizabeth, predictably, was livid. She sent me a series of scathing text messages, accusing me of tearing the family apart and betraying her. "You're nothing but a selfish, ungrateful brat," one message read. Mom and Dad gave you everything, and this is how you repay them. I didn't bother responding. I knew anything I said would only fuel her rage. The court proceedings began a few months later, and true to Lauren's prediction, it was messy. My parents' lawyer, a smarmy man named Victor Crane, tried to paint me as a greedy, ungrateful son who was lashing out because of jealousy. He brought up every instance where my parents had helped me financially, twisting the narrative to make it seem like I was the one taking advantage of them. But Lauren was ready for him. She methodically dismantled his arguments, presenting evidence of the blatant favoritism and manipulation that had defined my upbringing. She called witnesses who testified about the disparity in how my parents treated me versus Elizabeth, and she presented the damning financial records that showed the hundreds of thousands of dollars funneled into Elizabeth's secret account. The most shocking moment came when Lauren called Elizabeth to the stand. She was visibly annoyed, her usual confidence faltering under the weight of the cross-examination. Lauren didn't hold back, pressing her on the specifics of the bank account and the reasons behind the massive transfers from my parents. At first, Elizabeth tried to deflect, claiming the money was for necessary expenses and that my parents had offered it willingly. But when Lauren presented an email exchange between Elizabeth and my mother, in which Elizabeth explicitly demanded more money to cover her lifestyle, her facade cracked. "This is ridiculous," Elizabeth snapped, her voice rising. "I don't see why this is even relevant. Jackson is just jealous because he's always been second best." The courtroom fell silent, her words hanging in the air like a confession. Lauren let the moment linger before calmly turning to the judge. "I think that speaks for itself, Your Honor." The trial lasted several weeks, each day more exhausting than the last. But when the verdict finally came, it was worth every moment of stress and heartache. The judge ruled in my favor, citing clear evidence of financial manipulation and emotional harm. My parents were ordered to pay $1.2 million in compensation, a sum that felt less like a windfall and more like a validation of everything I had endured. The victory was bittersweet. I knew the money wouldn't fix the damage my family had done, and it certainly wouldn't repair our broken relationships. But it was a start. A way to reclaim my life and move forward without the weight of their manipulation holding me back. As Amelia and I left the courthouse that day, hand in hand, I felt a sense of relief I hadn't felt in years. For the first time, I was free. Free to live my life on my own terms, free to build a future that wasn't defined by the shadows of my past. And for the first time, I truly believed I deserved it. Moving to a new city was Amelia's idea, but as soon as she suggested it, I knew it was exactly what we needed. The court case had drained me emotionally and mentally, and staying in the same city felt like staying in the shadow of everything that had happened. The whispers, the sideways glances from people who knew my family, it was suffocating. Amelia found a place 400 kilometers away, a modest but charming apartment in a quiet neighborhood. It wasn't flashy, but it had everything we needed: space to start fresh and enough distance from my family to feel like a new chapter. Packing up our lives and saying goodbye to the city I had lived in for so long was bittersweet, but as we drove out of town that morning, I felt an unfamiliar sense of hope stirring in my chest. The new city was different, quieter, friendlier. Our neighbors introduced themselves on the first day, a retired couple named Greg and Marcia who lived across the hall. Greg was a handyman with a knack for fixing anything, and Marcia baked enough cookies to feed an army. "If you ever need anything, just knock," she said with a warm smile, handing us a plate of still warm chocolate chip cookies. I wasn't used to this kind of welcome. It felt foreign but comforting. Amelia and I threw ourselves into settling in. She started working remotely for her marketing firm, and I found a job managing operations for a local tech startup. It was smaller than what I was used to, but the environment was welcoming, and the lack of corporate drama was a relief. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. The real work, though, began when Amelia suggested we try therapy. "We've been through so much, Jackson," she said one evening as we unpacked boxes in the living room. "I think it could help both of us process everything and maybe help us figure out how to move forward." I hesitated at first. Therapy wasn't something I'd ever considered. It felt too vulnerable, too exposing. But Amelia was patient, and eventually, I agreed to give it a try. That's how we met Dr. Claire Matthews, a calm and empathetic therapist who had a way of making you feel safe, even when you were baring your soul. Our first few sessions were rough. Talking about my family dredged up memories I'd buried for years: the favoritism, the manipulation, the constant feeling of being less than. It all came flooding back, and there were moments when I wanted to walk out of her office and never look back. But Amelia was there, her presence steady and unwavering, and with time, I started to open up. Dr. Matthews helped me see patterns I hadn't fully understood before. She showed me how my parents' behavior had shaped not only my self-esteem but also my relationships and decision-making. You've spent so much of your life trying to prove your worth to people who were never going to see it, she said during one session. It's time to focus on what you want and what makes you happy. Amelia and I also worked on our relationship in therapy. The lawsuit, the family drama, the stress, it had taken a toll on both of us, and I hadn't realized how much until we started unpacking it. But the process brought us closer. For the first time, we weren't just surviving, we were building something real, something strong.
Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.
I was always ignored by my parents. As I grew up, my parents pulled me back home and forced me to take responsibility for my brother. When I started packing and left, my parents barely noticed. I was 25 at the time, just out of college, and ready to go it alone. However, I wasn't surprised by it. All my life, I had been the youngest of 5 children. I mean significantly younger when I say youngest. Emily, who is the next oldest, is 7 years older than I am. I'm different from the rest in a lot more ways. As a child, I occasionally felt like I didn't exist. My siblings continued to have affairs. Everything was left to me to handle. You've heard of glass children, youngsters whose siblings demand so much attention that they are ignored or become invisible. I guess I was. My brothers were constantly in and out of treatment programs, therapists' offices, and hospitals for whatever reason. I became the kid who didn't require much since I was okay. I didn't cause problems because I wasn't as ill or having difficulties as others were. So I was overlooked. I don't think that was intentional, but that's how it ended up. I didn't get the best attention. I can't say I had a terrible upbringing. I had everything I could possibly need in terms of food, shelter and clothes. However, I didn't exist emotionally. No one asked how my day went or whether I needed homework assistance. I improved my self-entertainment skills. It turns out that my friend played video games. Books gave people a way to escape. I would immerse myself in imaginary worlds while my brothers were losing themselves in real-life problems. I guess it was a survival strategy, although I didn't know at the time. Since I knew I wasn't creating any issues, I kept under the radar. I was not required to volunteer as a caregiver, in contrast to some others who had ailing family members. All of that was handled by my parents. I guess this was how they protected themselves, but they ignored me in the process. Although I didn't receive much attention, I also wasn't pressured to mature too soon. When all of your efforts are focused on keeping one or more children alive, the person who is not in crisis gets lost. I was that person. It wasn't completely awful. Laura and Sophie, who were basically my saviors, became friends by the time I was 9. We connected over that unspoken knowing, even if their houses weren't very attractive either. All we had to do was understand one another. We didn't need to tell each other why we felt ignored or invisible. We would spend hours at one another's houses to avoid the drama in our own families. Compared to the family I was born into, Laura and Sophie felt more like my own family. By the time we started middle school, we were clinging to each other like lifeboats in a hurricane. It wasn't much different in high school. My relationship with my parents remained distant, but my relationships with Laura and Sophie grew closer. We had ups and downs like any other adolescent, but the 3 of us remained close. We decided to attend the same university after graduating together. It was almost a given when it came time for college. We would go together, of course. It had nothing to do with academics or the school, but rather with maintaining our small family. After doing so, we remained inseparable for 4 years. After graduation, we decided to move to a different state, away from the chaos we were accustomed to. We set up our life in a tiny apartment. It was wonderful to be out on our own and finally focus on ourselves rather than balancing years of familial burdens. My parents barely heard from me for a while after that. I didn't imagine they would suddenly become interested in my life now because, to be honest, we hadn't talked much even when I was living at home. My mother would occasionally text me, generally with trivial questions like, "How's work?" or "What are you up to?" However, we rarely actually talked about anything. It was better that way, or at least that's how I saw it. I no longer required their attention. Sophie and Laura were enough. For once, I didn't feel like an abandoned child because we all had our own lives and goals. I was rather proud to have started a small family of my own. When my mother called last year, that began to alter. Thanksgiving was a few days away. I knew something was awry when her name appeared on my screen because I hadn't spoken to her on the phone in over a year. The last time Mom called, it was to let me know about my sister's burial arrangements, so phone calls always made me wonder. She immediately got to work asking me what time I was leaving for Thanksgiving at home. I was, to put it mildly, perplexed. First of all, I was unaware that they were even celebrating Thanksgiving because we didn't really observe holidays. We celebrated Christmas and Thanksgiving more times than I can count on one hand when I was a child. It was just not a trait of our family. Given our long-standing tradition, it seemed inappropriate to hear her ask in this manner. I told her I wouldn't be attending. I was planning. Laura, Sophie, and I had been planning a ski trip for months. I couldn't possibly cancel that with only 3 days' notice. Aside from that, I couldn't afford a last-minute plane ticket because I lived 2 states away. My mom didn't get it. She seemed as if I was being deliberately difficult when I tried to explain it to her, guilt-tripping me by saying that she would be alone herself because my dad was spending Thanksgiving with my brother Mike at the facility where he works. It seems that mom would spend the majority of the day alone while my dad was away. See, I got this. I understood why she wanted company, but she gave me 3 days' notice. She thought I would drop everything. When I told her again that I couldn't make it, she got upset and began to act as if I didn't care about the family. She said I was self-centered. After that, she hung up. For a while, I sat there feeling a peculiar mixture of regret and bitterness. Where had they been for me all those years, even though I felt bad for abandoning her? I was now the bad guy for not dropping everything to go home after not hearing from them for months. I searched through my old books for something I might have missed. However, nothing was present. Thanksgiving is not mentioned. You didn't say you wanted to come see me? I was more perplexed by this last-minute guilt trip than anything else. Later that night, I texted her to let her know that I would also be unable to attend Christmas. We planned to go on another excursion. She never responded when I said that I would love to catch up after the new year. I made an effort to be civil. The fact that a few days passed with no reaction was not shocking. I made an effort to get rid of the weird feeling that had entered my stomach, but it persisted. In hindsight, I think that phone conversation was only the beginning of something much bigger, something I hadn't anticipated. At that time, I had no idea how far this disaster would spread. I thought things would settle down after that odd Thanksgiving discussion, but my dad texted me a week or so later. I never get texts from my dad. He's more of a talk when necessary type of guy, let me tell you. I therefore thought there must be a severe issue when his name appeared on my phone. However, what I read when I opened the message seemed implausible. I genuinely burst out laughing. If you don't come home for Christmas, I'm cutting off your college payments. What exactly? I received my degree 3 years ago. No more college payments needed to be stopped. I tried to be lighthearted at first, thinking that perhaps he had confused me for one of my siblings or something. 3 years had passed with no payments. Check your bank account maybe? That, I thought, would be the final word. I reasoned that he would realize his mistake, laugh it off, and move on. Nevertheless, my phone buzzed again a few hours later. The message was longer this time around. Yes, my dad was very angry. He went on to talk about my selfishness, how I was abandoning the family, and how I didn't appreciate all the sacrifices my parents had made for me and my siblings. At this moment, I was just staring at my phone in amazement. I had never once made a request of them. To be honest, I was unaware that they believed they were covering my education expenses. All of my costs, including tuition, had been covered by Grandma. To be honest, I was relieved that she wanted my parents to be removed from that area of my life and out of the spotlight. My dad was trying to put me through this whole guilt trip, and it seemed completely unexpected. I'm sorry you feel that way, but Granny paid for my college. After the holidays, I'm glad to catch up, but I already have Christmas plans, I said after taking a big breath. I assumed that would end it, but it didn't, of course. Instead, he became more focused. He started talking about how the family was supporting me, how I was rejecting them, and how I didn't care about them twice. I was just done if I couldn't even try to spend the holidays at home. It seemed so absurd. When I moved out, people barely noticed that I had been living alone for years. Now, all of a sudden, I was abandoning the family, because I was not returning home for Christmas. The more I considered this, the more angry I got. I tried to brush it off and move on, but I couldn't help but notice how hypocritical it seemed. They hadn't inquired about my well-being, asked if I needed anything, or checked in on me for months. But I was supposed to drop everything and run when they asked for something. If not, it made no difference. I had the impression that I was merely a fallback option for them, someone they could depend on only when it was practical. I called Laura and Sophie to vent my frustration. As usual, they understood immediately. Laura said my parents probably just wanted to exploit me to boost their own self-esteem. She stated plainly, they don't really care if you're there. Sophie agreed with me. Screw them. They just want to feel like they've fulfilled their role as parents by getting you home for the holidays. You owe them nothing. That was it. It was just what I needed to hear. I owed them nothing. I made the decision to sleep on it that night before responding to my dad once more. I didn't want to make a mistaken statement. However, my phone buzzed once more as I laid there attempting to let it go. My dad sent me another stern message. If you don't come home, don't bother coming back at all. I froze as I gazed at the screen. It was like being punched in the stomach. How did we arrive here? From my own father essentially disowning me over Christmas, to hardly speaking to him? I wanted to react angrily, to confront him about all the times I felt invisible in that house and how they had ignored me. However, I decided not to respond. I laid over, put my phone down, and attempted to fall asleep. I had no intention of letting this derail my vacation plans. I received multiple more texts the following morning, this time from my mother. I couldn't help but giggle since they were more of the same, expressions of displeasure and perplexity over why I was being so detached. Separated? They were just now realizing that I had been aloof throughout my life. I ignored the books and focused on preparing for the ski trip. This had taken months of preparation, and Laura, Sophie, and I refused to let my parents bring me down with shame. We drove the following day, and I felt liberated for the first time in a long time. I wasn't feeling guilty about it, not with my parents in mind. I was content to spend time with the people who genuinely loved me. Naturally, though, things can't stay that way forever. My mother sent me another letter in the midst of my trip. Just when I thought I could relax. It had nothing to do with Christmas this time. If I don't come home soon, she added, they'll have to start making decisions about my future without me, which I don't enjoy. That's when it struck me. It had nothing to do with Christmas or the holidays, did it? They were planning something bigger, something much more. Maybe it was about my brother Mike, maybe about the house or the family finances. However, I was aware of one thing. They wanted me to be involved in whatever it was. Not because they were missing me. They needed me, for whatever reason. That was their insurance strategy. The realization came as a shock. All this time, I thought they were just trying to guilt-trip me into a homecoming for Christmas. I was never personally concerned about it, though. It was all about them. They cared because they wanted to spend time with me. They didn't care if I was present, and I refused to allow them to drag me back into their mess. After that, I stopped reading their messages. I made an effort to be in the moment and not think about what was waiting for me at home as I spent the remainder of the ski trip with Laura and Sophie. We drank too much hot chocolate, joked, and went skiing. It was just what I needed to re-energize. However, the peace would not endure. After the ski trip, I came home and made an effort to reorganize my routine. It felt good to be temporarily removed from all the family conflict, but I knew it would only last. Yes. My oldest brother Nick called me a few days later. It had been months, perhaps longer, since we had spoken. I therefore knew this would not be a casual talk when I saw his name on my phone. Nick was the one brother I ever thought would be sympathetic to me. I always believed that our relationship might have been better because he wasn't as ill as our other brothers. However, he was enmeshed in his own life, just like the rest of our family. When his name appeared, I paused. Curiosity won me over, even if I wanted to ignore it. Nick jumped right in before I could say hello. Mom and Dad have been talking about making you the legal guardian for Michael when they're gone. I sat there in shock for a moment. I felt like I was struck out cold by someone. Was this a prank of some sort? They had barely been in my life for years, and now they were going to force Michael's care on me. Throughout his life, Michael has spent time in and out of care facilities. What on earth? Finally, trying to maintain a calm tone, I asked, "What are you referring to?" My heart was pounding. Nick let out a sigh as if he were annoyed that I wasn't accepting this news with grace. You know the situation with Mom and Dad. They're not going to be around permanently, and they need someone to look after things when they go. I said in a trembling voice. And they consider someone to be me? After everything? After all the ignoring and guilt-tripping, they just believe I'll abandon my life and take up their mess? Nick didn't seem to get why I was offended. Look, you're the only one truly steady among the lot. The others have personal problems. You really have your life together. I almost burst out laughing. All together? What am I living? Yes, I had a solid job, a home, and I wasn't constantly in and out of hospitals, but it didn't mean I was prepared to care for someone, especially after years of treatment that was practically non-existent. Maybe you guys should have considered this before now, I said, growing increasingly irritated. They never bothered me about this. Nick came across as defensive. Like you said, as if everything was already decided behind your back. Until lately, I also knew neither. Still, I considered you should hear it from me before they tried to spring it on you. This has nothing to do with Christmas. Now, the scope of this went beyond a holiday. Michael's parents had big plans for him, and they hadn't even looked to see if I was prepared to take on that kind of responsibility. They just assumed I would. I said, "What then? Am I meant to move back home, drop my entire life, and give up all I have worked for to take care of Michael?" Nick had no answer for that. I didn't give a damn. I had been ignored my entire life because I wasn't causing trouble, despite his attempts to convey how hard things were for our parents and how they were balancing Michael's care. Problems. Since I wasn't crumbling like the others, I was destined to assume this massive responsibility. There was not enough fairness. I interrupted him in the middle and said, "I'm not doing it. I won't be their backup, not here." For a minute, Nick remained quiet. They didn't care about me for the last 25 years, and they don't deserve to make me answerable for anything now. He continued. "I get it. I do. Indeed. Still, you are a member of the family." I wanted to yell when I heard the word family. A family? Which family? The family that abandoned me while I was growing up? The family that only gets in touch with me when they need something? I did belong to the family, but only because it was convenient for them. I said, sounding resentful. They turned their backs on me a long time ago. I'm just finally walking away. There was silence on the other end of the telephone. After letting out a sigh, Nick remarked, "I'll tell them." After hanging up, I sat there and stared at the wall while attempting to sort everything out. There was a part of me that wanted to shout, throw something, and release all the anger I had accumulated over the years. Nevertheless, I simply felt lethargic and, to be honest, exhausted. I completed their contingency plan. I was expected to step up when things become difficult, but I was done being invisible when it was convenient. I didn't hear from Nick or my parents for a few days. It was as if they were waiting for me to realize my mistake and become the good daughter they had suddenly decided I should be. Even if I changed my mind, I would not move. I got a letter in the mail one afternoon. I wasn't going to let them burden me with their problems because I had my own life. This was from my mother. She had sent a letter instead of calling, maybe in keeping with our 1800s lifestyle or something. The letter was lengthy and haphazard, and it contained the same guilt-tripping nonsense I had heard my entire life. She went on to talk about how much they relied on me, how hard their lives were, and how they weren't sure what to do if I weren't there. What really got me, though, was the letter's final line. "Emily, we are not asking for much," she wrote. That's when I realized. They weren't begging me to be a part of their everyday life or missing me. This had to do with their wish for someone to clean up their mess when they were gone. When the family was gone, someone was needed to fill in. It was convenience, not connection or love. They wanted to patch things up because I was the only one who wasn't crumbling. I ripped the letter to pieces and tossed it in the trash. When I folded up that letter from my mother, I felt like I had gone as far as I could. I'm finished. I had nothing else to say to them. After years of disregard and usage when it was convenient, they wanted me to take the burden? Of course not. That, I decided, was the end. I blocked their phones after throwing away the letter. It was not the end, of course. A knock on my door occurred a few weeks after I had blocked their numbers. Since it was a weekday, I didn't anticipate anyone. I thought it may be a delivery at first, but my mother was simply standing there when I unlocked the door. She stood on my front porch as if she had a lot of right to be there. I hesitated, unsure if I should slam the door in her face or listen to her. Her appearance had altered. Maybe she was older, maybe she was just more tired. She wasn't the same woman I'd known growing up, for whatever reason. I was unable to determine if it was the years, the stress, or another factor. I didn't feel sorry for her though, not after everything. I tried to speak steadily as I asked, "This is where you are working?" She took a while to respond. She just stood there, looking at me as if she had forgotten who I was. Finally, "We need to talk, Emily," she said. I let out a groan. "No, we truly do not. I have said all I need to say." She took a step forward as if she were going inside, but I remained motionless. I had made the decision to let her in, despite all the deceit and guilt trips. Knowing I wouldn't move, she paused and her voice grew softer. "Your father's condition is growing worse. He visits the hospital, in and out. We have no idea how long he has left, my Emily." I had no idea what to do. "Your father is dying." The card was the one she had been waiting to play. She didn't say anything direct, but I could tell what she was attempting to say. And see, I'm not ruthless. I didn't want my dad to suffer. However, I couldn't just abandon everything and rush to their side like a docile child after everything they had done to me. "I apologize," I responded, attempting to sound composed. Still, this is not my issue. Years of figuring this out have gone between you and Dad. You cannot simply turn here right now and expect me to make everything right. She gave me the impression that I had struck her. I'm not calling for your fixing of anything, she replied. Simply put, I need you there for the family. Once more, that word. Family. I almost burst out laughing. Which family? The one who turned away from me 25 years ago? The one that only speaks with me when they need something? Mom, that family is not what we have. That's manipulation. I thought she was going to argue with me, but she just broke down in tears. My mother began crying on my doorstep, and I was at a loss for what to do. Furthermore, I couldn't just watch her cry. However, I had no intention of inviting her inside. Look, I replied, lowering my voice despite myself. I understand this presents challenges for you. I really do. I am not, however, your fallback option. I won't be the one to come and put things under control. You have to face the consequences of your decision. For a minute, I saw anger flicker over her face as she dried her tears and looked up at me. Emily, we did the best we could. You are not aware of what it was like raising all of you and juggling everything. We were trying to keep everyone else alive. Hence, we ran out of time for you. I had heard the same explanation a million times before. I had a firm voice. I said, and that's not my fault. You decided to bear 5 children. You decided to drop me behind and concentrate on everyone else. Not mine. That was your choice, and right now, you're attempting to shame me about it. Mom, I am not going to do it. She looked at me for a long time, as if she had forgotten who I was. Maybe she still thought of me as the quiet student who never caused trouble and could be ignored because I didn't require her. However, that child had vanished. They couldn't use me to clean up their mess since I wasn't invisible. Thus that's it? She said in a cold tone. You're just going to ignore us? She finally questioned. I gave a headshake. Not yes. Many years ago, you turned away from me. After that she remained silent. I'm just finally walking away. All she did was turn and go back to her car. I watched her leave while feeling a weird mixture of feelings. Of course, I was depressed, but I felt liberated most of the time. It seemed like I had finally let go of something that had been bothering me for years, something I should have let go of a long time ago. I went back inside and took a seat, attempting to organize things. I was no longer angry with her. I wasn't even injured. All I did was carried out. I had life to live, and I refused to allow them to drag me back into their mess despite the humiliation, the manipulation, and the constant feeling of inadequacy. There was silence for the following few weeks. No SMS, no calls, no mail. It seemed like a huge burden had been lifted off my shoulders, and they finally appeared to understand that I would not be coming back. I focused on my life, my career, and my friends. I didn't keep an eye on myself, anticipating the next guilt trip. I was defying established conventions. Their expectations were no longer a burden on me. After about a month, Nick sent me an email. It was only a few sentences long, but it covered everything I needed to know. Last night Dad passed away. I'm not sure how to feel. I thought you ought to be aware. I spent a lot of time looking at the email. It wasn't shocking to me. This was headed my way, I knew. To be honest, I didn't feel depressed or anything else. Actually, I did nothing. I thought about answers for a while. I thought about calling Nick to see how he was doing and maybe even to offer my condolences. But then I realized that this was only another stage in the same cycle, another chance for them to pull me back in. And this time, I hadn't been duped. Without replying, I dismissed the email and continued with my day. I had finally come to terms with leaving their world. I was publicly humiliated by my family at my sister's lavish wedding. Am I the asshole for peeling back the mask of their ideal family? The crystal champagne flute trembled in my hand as I watched my sister Serafina glide down the altar. The frothy mixture of silk and lace she wore for her wedding was worth more than my annual salary. As soon as I noticed my mother's icy look from the front row, I knew. It was an error of mine to be here. The disappointment to the family, the uninvited sister, who dared to attend Serafina's ideal society wedding. I took a seat further back in the large ballroom. I hoped the gorgeous flower arrangements would shield me from more scathing glances. 2 rows up, a stage whisper echoed, "Can you believe she had the nerve to come?" After what happened at the clinic. I took hold of my husband Liam's hand. It was only his silent encouragement that kept me from fleeing. Our daughter, Maya, 6, fidgeted in her Sunday best, oblivious to the tension that flickered through the air like static before a storm. The wedding march was played by the string quartet. Both are picture perfect. Julian, Serafina's fiancé, was waiting for her at the altar. As he handed her over, the same father who informed me 10 years earlier that I was dead to him grinned, his pleasure beaming across the room. When Mother stood up, the officiant had hardly finished speaking. She glanced at the crowd, her high heels clicking on the marble. "If anyone objects to this union, speak now or permanently hold your peace," she stated. Then she looked directly at me and said, "I apologize, everyone." Years of social manipulation had sharpened her voice, and it echoed loudly in the still room. "But we have an uninvited guest who needs to leave. Ilara, you were explicitly told you were not welcome at family events. This is a private ceremony." 200 faces turned in my direction. Maya pulled away from me. "Mommy, why is Grandma?" Serafina's exquisitely manicured lips curled into an angry smile. "Security, please escort my former sister out. She's trying to ruin my special day, as usual." "Former sister?" Maya's tiny voice broke. "Nonetheless, Aunt Serafina." "I'm not your aunt, dear," Serafina vehemently stated. "Your mother betrayed us all, losing her right to call herself family years ago." Adjacent to our row, 2 security personnel emerged. Liam got up and stood between them and me, saying, "We're leaving? No need for force." Mother's poisonous voice said, "How dare you bring a child into this mess, Ilara? You haven't changed at all, trying to manipulate us with an innocent girl." My cheeks got hot as we went past bewildered guests. Maya trembled in my grasp. Like poison darts, the whispers followed us. Somebody said, "Always was the troubled one. Such a shame what she did to her poor parents. That poor child, having her for a mother." I swung around and halted at the ballroom doors. Serafina stood triumphant at the altar with her mother and father at her sides like proud sentinels. With the exception of the black sheep daughter they killed, it was the perfect family scene. "Congratulations, Serafina," I said loudly over the silence. "I hope the basis of your marriage is more honest than that of your life." For a moment, her smile faltered. "Excellent. I'll tell her what I know." In the lobby, Maya broke down in tears. "Why don't they love us, Mommy?" I embraced her while observing Liam's worried gaze across her head. He was aware of what this meant. My years of cautious composure were shattered. My hand was driven by their humiliation of me in front of my daughter. I stroked her hair and said, "Some people, sweetheart, aren't capable of real love," my determination growing stronger with each sob. For 10 years, I've stayed away, swallowing their lies. 10 years of watching Serafina build her perfect life on stolen dreams and buried secrets. But seeing my daughter cry? That's the final straw. They want to talk about betrayal? Fine. Time to show them what real betrayal looks like. I have everything to prove and nothing left to lose. Go for it, my sister. Go for it. The drive home after Serafina's wedding seemed to go on forever. With tears still apparent on her cheeks, Maya had slept out in the back seat. The silence between us stretched like a rubber band on the verge of breaking, and Liam's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. Finally, he muttered, "You shouldn't have gone," in a quiet voice so Maya wouldn't wake up. We discussed this. Dozens of social media alerts about the tragedy flashed as I followed the edge of my phone's screen. They made my daughter weep, Liam. Our daughter. "And whose fault is that?" he replied, his jaw clenched. "You knew exactly what would happen." He made a left turn toward us. "You wanted it to happen, perhaps because there was truth in it. The charge was more painful than I thought it would be. Pull over, Liam. Pull over right now." He pulled the car into an empty lot. Moving between faded parking lines, I fled in search of air that was not dense and devoid of unsaid words. My sweaty skin felt frigid against the twilight air. Liam left the car running for Maya and followed. "Talk to me. What's really going on?" I sounded brittle when I laughed. "Did you see her face? The way she looked at me? You never wanted to discuss it before." Perfect Serafina told everyone why I was disowned. You know what she told everyone about? The words had a vinegar-like flavor. She told them I stole from the clinic and embezzled money allocated for patient treatment. Anyway, she's working there right next to Father. Probably. Liam was not an expert. I halted. "Not right now." His expression was filled with worry as he approached nearer. "Likely what?" My phone buzzed. A message from an unidentified number. "I understand exactly what happened 10 years ago. Meet me at 2 p.m. tomorrow. Coffee on Carson Street. Ilara." Liam's hand on my shoulder made me jump. "What aren't you letting me know?" I sent him the SMS message. His stance grew gloomy. "Could be a trap. Your family may not be my family anymore." I turned to face the car again. Someone at the clinic knows something. Someone who was there when everything fell apart. He grabbed my arm and said, "And you're just going to meet this mystery person? After what happened today? Think about Maya. About us." I said, "I am thinking about us." As I stepped back a little. "That's why I have to do this. They embarrassed our daughter Liam. Made her doubt everything about who she is. Who I am. Thus, this is about revenge? This is about truth." Through the car window, I saw Maya sleeping peacefully in spite of everything. Serafina built her whole life on lies. The clinic, her marriage to Julian, her reputation. They were all built on top of what she had stolen from me. I recognized the indication from our 10 years of marriage when Liam ran a hand through his hair. He was listening, but he was nervous. "Exactly what are you hoping for?" I firmly locked his eyes and said, "Nothing yet, but if someone's finally willing to talk. I need to know if you are really with me, not just standing on the sidelines while I fight this battle alone." He observed me quietly for a while before saying, "You're different tonight. There's something in your eyes I haven't seen before." I moved closer and took his hands, saying, "Maybe because I finally see things clearly. Remember when we first met? You mentioned I was carrying too many ghosts. You were right. But Liam, they were monsters dressed in my family's faces, and I let them haunt me for too long. They were not ghosts. We were swept by the headlights of one car as it passed." Liam's face began to reflect understanding in that little moment. He hugged me tightly. He whispered, "I'm with you." Into my hair. "But we do this cleverly. We do this right. No more improvised confrontations. Agreed?" I breathed in his familiar aroma, gaining strength from his solid presence. "Coming with me tomorrow at the coffee shop? Watch from a distance, make sure it's not a setup." He pulled back and touched my face, saying, "Of course. But, Alara, promise me something. Always. We protect Maya first. Whatever we learn, whatever happens, always." "Always," I said, although I was aware that sometimes defending oneself meant retaliating. Sometimes it entails destroying everything in order to use the ashes to construct something bigger. Maya shifted a little in the car, murmuring in sleep. I felt my will stiffen like titanium as I stared at her. Serafina and my parents thought they could make me look foolish again. Instead, they had provided me with just what I needed, a reason to quit running and start defending myself. My mysterious messenger appeared. "I'll begin gathering the matches I need to light this whole facade tomorrow." Tomorrow. However, I would be cuddling my child tonight and reflecting on why the truth was more important than any easy lie. I discovered Ms. Chen, our family clinic's former accountant, hunched over a laptop in the corner of Carson Street Coffee, which was bustling with afternoon traffic. Liam caught my eye from his position at the counter and acknowledged in silence that he was watching. Opposite Ms. Chen, I sank onto the chair. Her fingers were a little unsteady as she closed her laptop. 10 years is a long time to stay quiet. "I wasn't sure you would show up." I spoke in a neutral tone even though my heart was pounding. "Where now?" Uncomfortably, she looked around and distributed a USB disk. "Your sister's wedding. It was all over social media. When I saw what they did to you, you ought to see something here." The drive felt very heavy in my hand. "What's on it?" Miss Chen softened her voice and leaned forward. "Financial records from before you left. Your father actively covered up massive ones. Your father didn't just frame you for embezzlement, Alara." I got my coffee. Miss Chen stammered at Liam's presence because of his quiet manner of staying close. When he was gone, she went on. She stated, "The patient passed away in 2013. Remember? How could I forget? After receiving experimental treatment, a patient with terminal cancer passed away. The inquiry exonerated the clinic. However, what about it? Serafina administered the wrong dosage. She wasn't qualified, hadn't even completed her medical training." The comments spoken by Ms. Chen were like physical blows. "Your father buried it, paid off the family. He used the money he claimed you had taken." The coffee cup trembled on the saucer as I set it down. "Do you have evidence?" "Everything's on that drive, including evidence that Serafina never finished medical school. The credentials her clinic uses are all falsified." My throat constricted. "Why did you not step forward back then?" Her face reddened with shame. "Your father threatened my family. My daughter was sick. I needed the insurance. But she's grown now, and I noticed what happened at the wedding. The way they're still hurting you." My phone was buzzing from Serafina. "Having coffee with anyone intriguing?" I glare and catch a glimpse of Julian's automobile through the window as it drives off. They were watching me. With a hint of terror in her voice, Mrs. Chen knew this. "I wouldn't have." I stood up, held out an arm, and said, It's okay. Let my husband drive you home. Liam arrived immediately and walked Mrs. Chen out after reading the situation. Just catching up with old friends. Married life, how is it? Is what I said to Serafina. She answered right away. Keep your distance from Mrs. Chen, there should be some stories buried. I snatched up the USB device and began thinking quickly. However, it was father who sent the following message. Your place of employment, 1 hour, come alone, Mrs. Chen loses everything. Something had altered, but it was obviously dangerous. The trembling in my hands was sudden anticipation instead of fear. I was stopped at the clinic by father's secretary, but I pushed by her and went into his office, where Serafina and he waited. Serafina said, "That was quick," but her usual haughtiness disappeared. I approached father across his desk and said, "Enough games. You want to threaten Mrs. Chen? Go ahead. First, explain something. How many other patients did Serafina kill?" He lost the color in his face. Serafina took a step. "You're talking about something else entirely." I took note of their answers. 2013. Terminal cancer patient. Wrong dosage. Ring any bells? You've obviously lost your mind, remarked father. However, I interrupted him. Funny thing about buried secrets, someone always keeps receipts. I grabbed my phone and listened to the recording of Mrs. Chen. Wonder what the medical board would find. For my phone, Serafina pressed forward. Her front fell apart as I sidestepped with ease. You are bluffing. Try me. I turned to face father. You destroyed my life to protect her. Framed me for theft. Erased me from the family. All to cover her mistakes. He spoke in a cold tone. That which was required. Serafina had promise. You were always difficult, complicated. I laughed, and the sound was so harsh that they both flinched. I was the only one speaking the truth. Now I have evidence. What do you want? Asked Serafina. I walked over to the door and put my hand on the handle before hesitating. I smiled this time as I saw decades of pain solidify into meaning. Want? I want you both to know what's coming. Every lie, every cover-up, every patient you've put at risk, it all comes out. This time, I'm not the one that vanishes. I ignored their objections as they followed me out. I had enough facts in my pocket thanks to the USB drive to destroy their perfect world. Allow them to attempt to stop me. The young child I was? No longer scared. They should have been terrified of me. Financial documents, fictitious credentials, and patient records were among the contents that splattered onto my laptop screen from the USB stick. With every item, the evidence against my family grew stronger. As I answered an email thread from mother and father, my hands trembled. I turned the television to reveal Liam pacing our home office. You need to see this, I murmured. His jaw locked, he leaned forward to glance over the files. To my own ears, my voice sounded distant. They knew about the other patients. 3 more deaths, all covered up, all credited to natural causes or equipment faults. The doorbell rang. Through the window, I saw Julian's expensive car arrive into our driveway. I took Liam's arm as he approached the entrance. Let me take care of this. The confident man from Serafina's marriage was nothing like Julian. His eyes were darkened by deep wrinkles, and his tie was untied. We must chat, Alara. With a deliberate lack of offer, I led him to the kitchen. His wedding band was a toy. His eyes swept across my laptop. Serafina told me what you had, he continued. Whatever they're presenting to you, who's delivering what? He ran a hand through his hair and replied. The medical board investigators. They asked about disparities in Serafina's credentials yesterday. My heart raced, but my eyes remained unfocused. I haven't contacted any investigators. He said, Don't lie to me. In a voice that broke. He mumbled. I know what she did. What they all did. I've been reviewing the clinic's records since the wedding and I can't. I have evidence too. Things even you don't know about. But if this gets out, it won't just destroy Serafina and your parents. Other good people are involved, just following orders. My phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. An anonymous complaint regarding probable maltreatment in your house just arrived at your daughter's school. CPS has been notified. Panic rose and the room swayed slightly. Julian saw how I responded. He whispered, They're desperate. They will do anything to maintain this silence. Like pieces of ice, the words came out of me. They're threatening my daughter. Julian replied as he leaned forward. Let me help you. I can get you money, enough to disappear, start fresh somewhere else. Just hand over the evidence. There was Liam in the doorway. His manner stayed the same. Julian remarked. I guess you should leave, as he stood up. You don't understand. They'll fabricate evidence against you, Alara. Mark already called in favors with local authorities. They'll take Maya. Get out, I said in the same tone. Tell my sister and parents they just made their biggest mistake. After Julian went, I shook, but Liam held me, feeling determined instead of scared. He said, we have to move quickly. Should they be involving Maya? No. I turned aside as my ideas began to solidify into a new plan. We're running. Call your sister at the newspaper. It's time everyone knew exactly who the Millers really are. My fingers raced across the screen, arriving at encrypted files that I had spent weeks gathering. Alara, they killed Mrs. Chen? They'll destroy us if we run, Liam replied. But they neglected something vital about cornered animals. What's that? I turned the screen in his direction and showed him the audio recordings, surveillance photos, and backup data from the parallel study I had been conducting with Mrs. Chen. Those fight hardest when they have nothing left to lose. I started sending emails to all of the major national news outlets. Mother wants to play games with her granddaughter's safety? Fine, let's see how she likes it when the whole world knows exactly what kind of monster she really is. According to Liam, this could backfire spectacularly. Probably, I said as I sent the emails and saw them disappear into the internet. But I'm done playing according to their rules. The first national news alert appeared on my phone a few minutes later. The dispute was recognized, and this time, my goal was to completely destroy them rather than just disclose the facts. The police arrived at 3 a.m. I started from the window of our bedroom as they took Liam away in handcuffs, their accusations of embezzlement, conspiracy, and fraud echoing through the quiet street. All made up, all carefully planned to ruin him. Thankfully, Maya slept through it. I watched her quiet breathing from her doorway, knowing that I was the cause of this. Later, a call from Father's number buzzed through my phone. His voice carried decades of trained dominance as he asked, "Are you satisfied? This is just the beginning, Alara. Walk away now or tomorrow." It's her school calling with concerns about her home life. Quietly, I ended the call. I packed Maya's favorite stuffed animal, clothes, and her favorite photo album in her overnight bag. I had trembling hands. Liam's sister Claire arrived precisely 1 hour later, looking scared and bewildered. It's just for a few days. Like a holiday with Aunt Claire, I said to Maya as she woke up. But what about Daddy? What about you? I hugged her and breathed in her comforting aroma. We'll fix everything, I promise. After they left, the house appeared to be a tomb. I poured myself a glass, but before I could take a swallow, the front door was pounded. Serafina stood on my doorstep, her face smudged with mascara. They are going to kill you. What? She pushed by me while hastily examining doors and windows. I overheard them speaking. Father hired someone. They're making it look like a break-in gone bad. Why are you showing me this? Because Mrs. Chen was my friend too, her voice cracked. And I cannot have another death on my conscience. For the first time in years, I genuinely looked at my sister. The perfect facade had fallen apart, revealing a person who was equally damaged as I was. Additionally, Julian left me, she added. She took hold of my arm. The medical board revoked my license. Everything's falling apart, and they're just worried about protecting themselves like they always have. They're just worried about it. You have to run. Right now. Take what you can. The windows were brushed by headlights. Serafina stopped. They're here, I told her to get out the back, as I was already making my way to my laptop. 2 minutes is all I need. Alara, go. I instantly uploaded everything to several secure servers. The front door shattered beneath the weight of powerful boots as she vanished. 2 males came in with their faces turned away. Expert. Clinical. I knew the expression, the same cold efficiency Father always praised in his business dealings. This can be easy or difficult, Mrs. Collins, the taller guy replied kindly. As they came closer, I looked aside and bought seconds. My father sends his greetings. The Millers send their sympathies over your terrible accident. A clicking sound caused them to turn. Serafina held her phone while she stood there. She declared, I live stream everything? The men looked at each other. At that moment, I sprang toward the front door, but the shorter one grabbed me. My face erupted in pain as he hit me. I observed Serafina walk toward the man through blurry vision. Run, she cried out loud. I staggered onto the street with blood in my mouth. My ears are ringing. Behind me, glass broke. I couldn't tell if it belonged to her or to me. She let out another scream. The lights flashed on in the dwellings of the neighbors. An automobile engine roared to life somewhere. Professional to the last, the men left my residence and made their way gently to their car. Serafina was asleep in the kitchen, her phone crushed close by. But she was breathing, and when sirens screamed in the distance, she started to stir. With a whisper. "Did you get it?" she said. "The evidence?" "Yes." As she sat up, I pointed out the bruises that were already starting to form. I questioned. "Why did you come back?" She caressed her injured lip lightly and said, "Because I remember. Before they turned us against each other, I remember when you were my big sister. And I missed that person." The sirens approached. Soon there would be questions, remarks, and more lies from parents. Liam remained in prison. Maya had left. Everything I had constructed was in ruins all around me. However, what older sister Serafina said struck a chord with me. I felt something, not forgiveness yet, not at all. Nevertheless, it touched something deep to know that we had both been manipulated by our parents and turned against one another for their own purposes. I said, "We have to end this." As my kitchen walls were illuminated with red and blue lights. Not just expose them, destroy them. Totally. As Serafina gazed at me, I saw my sister instead of my enemy for the first time in decades. I took hold of her hand and we both felt the weight of our own wounds and our shared tragedies. We were like that, bloodied but unbowed, when the police showed in the following day. Finally, together against the real demons in our story. Assume our parents would prevail. Their darkest horror was going to turn into their ideal family fantasy. The Miller Family Clinic's annual charity banquet served as our battleground. Serafina and I watched our parents work the room separately, acting as though nothing was wrong and that they hadn't attempted to have me killed the previous week. Mrs. Collins, one of the board members, touched my arm. "Surprised to see you here, given the circumstances." Using Mother's perfect social mask, I smiled. I wouldn't miss it. Father reached for the podium across the room. "Welcome everyone. Tonight, we honor 30 years of serving our community." Serafina indicated that everything was prepared from near the AV stand. I reached for my phone. Liam's attorney had confirmed that Father's accounts offered concrete evidence of financial malfeasance and that the charges against him had been dropped. "I'd like to share a video highlighting our clinic's achievements," Father added. Instead of the planned presentation, security footage took the stage as the lighting grew darker. Father, counting money at his job. Mother, threatening to alter patient records with Mrs. Chen. Each clip was completely damning, dated, and recorded. Shock rippled through the room as the audience gasped. Even though Father fumbled with the microphone, his voice was overpowered by the sound of him giving the command to beat me. Mother screamed, "Turn it off!" But Serafina held the door of the AV booth closed. I moved forward, my words echoing over the stunned silence. 30 years of fraud, corruption, and murder. Is this what we're celebrating? "Security!" shouted Father, but the hired officers remained still. They were working for me tonight. I took a step toward the podium. "Just like the private investigators watching you, the forensic accountants tracking your bribes, and the lawyers building cases for every family you've destroyed." Mother's cool head broke as she lunged at me. "You unappreciative," Serafina replied. "Careful, Mother," as she appeared from the throng. "The press is recording this right now." As invited anonymous reporters recorded every remark and every scene, cameras did indeed flash. Father's face twisted in rage as he asked, You planned this together? My own daughters?" "Your daughters," I said, my laughter piercing like shattered glass. "Everything I did was to protect this family," he growled. "You tried to kill me. Last week, you framed my husband, you threatened my child." With brutally digging fingers, he seized my arm. "Let her go," said Serafina in a firm, steely voice. "Or I tell them about Jason." Dad froze. The mother said, "What?" "The patient from 2011, Serafina replied, purposefully staring at him. "Except it wasn't the equipment, was it? It was you, trying to cover up a mistake that would have cost you everything. You blamed equipment failure." "You knew?" Mother said in a shaky voice. Serafina answered. "I found the actual records." With a little tremble in her voice. "You never protected me because you loved me. You did it because you needed someone under your control. The ones you kept to blackmail the manufacturer realized that too." This time, actual policemen entered the ballroom. Father shoved me away as he saw them and ran for the door. Julian, my surprise ally, tripped him before he had taken 3 steps. The chamber reverberated with the sound of shackles snapping into place as Father lay splayed on the marble floor. As Mother fought her own arrest, shouting a long list of denials and obscenities, the investigator started. "Mark Miller, you are under arrest." He then read him his rights. "You're charged with conspiracy to commit murder, fraud." I wasn't listening though. I saw as their masks were irreparably broken and their utopia crumbled. My arm slid across Serafina's. "You're free now," she remarked quietly. I continued to yell against unappreciative kids as I watched Mother being hauled away. However, I had a strange weight lift, a future emerging in which I was no longer under their control. I suffocated by the way my girlfriend turns everyday life into a fairy tale. How can I tell her the truth without breaking her heart? Throwaway because my main topic can be connected to my girlfriend's blog. I have been with my girlfriend for about 5 months, we've been casual friends since college, but only began dating after she graduated. We get along really well. When I say princess syndrome, I don't mean that she is spoiled or entitled, because she isn't. Her clothes seem to take over her life. She dresses like a sort of fairy tale princess on a near daily basis, excluding at work. Long, frilly skirts, lacy blouses, things like that. It works for her because she is very pretty and can pull it off. At first I found it to be very endearing, but then I became aware of how much time she spends on her outfits. She runs a blog that has a sizable amount of followers, and she is constantly posting outfit pictures, links to clothing items, and whatnot. She spends a few hours a day on her blog, at least. Then she spends time sewing items for new outfits or for her Etsy store. When we go out, we get a lot of stares at what she's wearing. I've also caught people sneaking pictures of her on their cell phones. This attention makes me uncomfortable. I have asked her to tone it down a bit, but she took that to mean not wearing anything in her hair when we're out together. I have told her several times that I love her just the way she is, but she seems to brush it off. I had hoped when she started her new job in the career of her choice that she would become more serious, but her new boss and coworkers encouraged her. I worry that people won't take her seriously, or miss how kind and intelligent she is. How can I talk to her about dressing more appropriately without hurting her feelings? Update 1. Too long, didn't read, girlfriend dresses like a princess? How do I talk to her about it? Relevant comments. Commenter, sounds like you have to get over your insecurities. This is her hobby, her interest, and she's getting positive reactions. You shouldn't be trying to change her, especially when it was something that initially drew you to her. Oop. I guess I'm having trouble seeing clothing as a hobby. I play video games as a hobby, but that doesn't cause strangers to take pictures of me when I'm trying to shop at the supermarket. I get your point that it initially drew me to her, because it did. That's fair. I guess I didn't think that it would be such a constant thing in her life, especially after she graduated. Commenter. So, you love her just the way she is, but you're assuming she'll take that to mean she should change how she is? That doesn't make sense. This is how she is. She enjoys dressing up like this. Shit, she posts outfit photos online because she enjoys it so much. Other people encourage her because they do like how she is. If you don't like the attention, ask her sometime to just go out with you while she's wearing a casual outfit, but keep in mind that she already loves what she's normally wearing. Oop, this is my problem. How do I ask her to dress more casually around me without her misinterpreting what I mean again, and also not hurting her feelings? I can think of ways to say one half of that, but it doesn't work with the other half. Commenter. If you love her the way she is, why do you want her to change? Just curious. Oop. She doesn't need all the frilly stuff, she'd still look like a princess. And it's one thing for an artsy college student to dress alternatively, but she's a 23-year-old woman now. I feel like her clothing masks how smart she is and makes her appear shallow. Is it for attention? I do think it's an attention thing. She says she doesn't care about what people think about her, but she spends so much time on her blog, replying to comments and such, I kind of doubt it. She also has told me that she loves being approached by little girls while she's dressed up, which definitely makes me think it's about attention. She doesn't dress inappropriately by those standards, she is well groomed and doesn't show much skin. But is it appropriate to wear lacy dresses and flower crowns to the supermarket? Again, it attracts unnecessary attention. Update 2. I didn't plan on updating, but things changed. I realized from my last post that I needed to be more supportive, but also communicate on how she could dress down on certain occasions so we could both be comfortable. Well, I never got a chance to talk to her about it. Last week she called and wanted to stop by my apartment after work. When she got there I offered to make dinner, but she said she couldn't stay and we had to talk. I jokingly asked if she was breaking up with me, and she looked really guilty. You can see where this is going. We talked about how we were in different places in life and had different goals for the future. Well, she talked, but I agreed. It was a pretty amicable breakup, even though I felt blindsided. We agreed to stay friends. I've never been dumped before, and it's fucking awful. I'm having trouble with the whole social media thing post-breakup. I want a way to keep in touch with her, but as soon as her relationship status changed, all these alternative-looking guys have been liking her posts and commenting on her pictures. I don't think she's seeing these guys, but it still hurts. My friend wants to set me up on a date, but I don't know if it's a good idea. Relevant comments. Commenter. Fickle is the head that wears the flowered lace crown. It was never going to work out anyway. You had some laughs and some good times, enjoy that and move on. OP. I understood some of her reasoning. Mainly, I want to move out of the city once my lease is up, and I wanted her to move in with me. I was worried about the long distance. She didn't want to leave the city, though. She said something about me being controlling too, but I don't think that's the case at all. Blocker. We agreed to stay friends, so I don't want to block her. Update 3. 9 years, 8 months later, I was going through an old email and found this account again. I was surprised I could still log in, and even more by the amount of people who had reached out to me. It's a bit embarrassing to relive this breakup from almost 10 years ago. In retrospect, it wasn't meant to be, and I think I was reeling more from getting dumped than the loss of the relationship. I am 33 now and married to a wonderful woman, 31 female, for 4 years. I learned my lesson about supporting my significant other's hobbies. My wife loves running and baking. We have a daughter who is turning 3 this year. I want her to be free to express herself how she likes, as long as it is safe, of course. I would do anything for them. I am still friends with my ex-boyfriend on social media. We don't talk but we'll like each other's posts. She is married to another woman now who also dresses differently. It's not as frilly as she used to dress, but still unusual. Her pictures look like something out of Anne of Green Gables. She seems very happy on their farm together. Too long, didn't read, was dumb in my early 20s. Got over an old breakup and now I am married and happily supporting my wife's hobbies. Relevant comment. Commenter. Can we expect an update in 10 years when your daughter has become a teenager and developed princess syndrome? Also, congratulations on your life. Oop. Well, she does love pink and purple. I was harassed by my coworkers for suddenly losing weight after undergoing emergency surgery to remove an 18-pound tumor. I just came back to work after a month-long emergency medical leave. The TLDR is that after a decade of medical gaslighting, a new doctor ordered an emergency MRI during a routine visit and discovered a mass in my abdomen. I was rushed into surgery within 24 hours. I ended up having an 18-pound benign tumor pressing on my vital organs, and I was about a week away from multiple organ failure. I'm lucky to be alive, and time will tell if I have any lasting organ damage, but right now everything is fine. Mentally I'm struggling with a few things, but the only outwardly noticeable impact is that I've gone from a size 20 to a size 8. Nobody on my medical team anticipated a change this drastic, but I'm healthy and lucky. I was expecting to get a lot of questions from my coworkers because curiosity exists. I had a basic emergency surgery, but I'm fine now. Answer that almost everyone accepted but one coworker who I hardly speak to, Aubrey. On my first day back to work, Aubrey came up to me and said, "I wish you had come to me to lose weight instead of resorting to such drastic measures. You're going to gain it all back. You know, I'll be waiting." I was aware of Aubrey's reputation, but since we never worked together I didn't think it would be an issue. She's one of those people who thinks they're a fitness expert and calls herself a health coach, nothing to do with the company we work for. She has a reputation for giving out unsolicited and incorrect health advice, and is always commenting on people's food choices. I was speechless when she asked why I opted to get butchered instead of putting in the hard work to lose the weight. There's nothing wrong with someone choosing surgical weight loss options, but that's not what happened to me, and I really resented her aggressive attitude spreading rumors. During my second week back, she came by my office at the end of the day in athletic gear, offering to go with me if I was too afraid to go to the gym alone. At the time I wasn't even cleared to lift my kid, do laundry, or climb a flight of stairs, let alone go to the gym with this crackpot. I don't remember what I said to her, but she left saying I'd gain the weight back because I'm lazy. The next day Aubrey ranted angrily about me in a meeting I wasn't in, missed it for a follow-up, ironically. I don't know everything that was said, but the gist was that if I can't dedicate myself to weight loss, I obviously can't see my work obligations through. HR called for a red flag mediation. At our company, mediation can go against your bonus opportunities for the year. I have no idea why I'm in mediation when she's the one being an asshat. At the mediation, Aubrey stated that she was triggered by my new body, and I should have thought of other people's feelings and warned her before my surgery. I hardly had time to warn my husband and get my kid out of daycare. I don't owe Aubrey anything. I have empathy that she's obviously struggling, but that does not excuse her behavior. HR said that while they can't ask me to explain my medical history, It might clear the air if I told her what kind of surgery I had and why. I said I wasn't obligated to share my medical information with anyone and that Aubrey having bad coping skills doesn't entitle her to a coworker's personal health information. Their response was kind of, well, then we can't stop her from bullying you. After Thanksgiving, my doctor helped me put in ADA accommodation paperwork so I could work from home. I was having some mild complications from surgery but also to avoid Aubrey. This company hates remote work so they're really not happy. Aubrey still emails me workout videos and diet plans, and when I forward them to HR their response is, noted. Do you know when you're coming back to the office? I've been thinking about escalating this to corporate with an employment lawyer. Is that overkill? I'm still in a sensitive place after my surgery and I have no energy for this, especially since Aubrey is fixated on weight loss, which was the primary way doctors gassed me for years. I've been with this company for 5 years and I'm just exhausted and disappointed in how they're handling this, and I want it over yesterday. Update 1, all I have to say for this update is hold on to your banana pants. I saw a lot of comments asking where management was in all this, so I'll address that first. My boss, George, was getting ready to retire while this was going on. George is roughly my grandfather's age, so this entire situation bewildered both him and his replacement, who he was training at the time. Both of them met with Aubrey's boss, because believe me, I was documenting everything she did from the jump, and they all assured me that Aubrey would be dealt with. None of them recommended the red flag mediation. That was HR's idea. I was given details of the meeting where Aubrey ranted about me and it was horrible, but apparently Aubrey was asked to leave by her own boss while several other employees told her to stop. So managerially and in the office in general, people were trying to rein her in from many different angles. HR is where the ball dropped, and dropped hard. This company just has a poor HR structure and bad entry to mid-level HR. When Aubrey's boss referred her to HR regarding her negative behavior, HR took it upon themselves to consider it a mediation situation, which, remember, at our company can go against your bonus for the year. Despite communication from George, his replacement, and Aubrey's boss saying I wasn't in the wrong. When George found out about this, he spoke to the HR generalist manager, who said that my absence probably caused a lot of strain and extra work for Aubrey, when Aubrey's not even credentialed to do what I do. Management made a point to tell me how baffled and upset they were with HR's handling of the situation every time something came up. My company mentor was also a huge support during this time until she decided to take another job elsewhere. When my doctor extended my ADA work from home accommodation a second time, HR responded by telling me my attendance was a concern. I emailed their boss's boss, the HR director, and asked for clarification. He said I hadn't come into the office, so of course my attendance was a problem. I reiterated I had medical documentation stating that if WFH wasn't available then they could refer to the FMLA documentation my medical team also sent. He replied that medical documentation, including both FMLA and ADA reasonable accommodations, doesn't hold much weight with the company. That's when I got a lawyer. Aubrey as a problem kind of drifted to the background when HR started their medical documentation doesn't matter campaign. On my lawyer's recommendation, I contacted the HR executive team, which is where this whole cursed situation came to light. And I did check with my lawyer about emailing this update and they laughed and said I couldn't leave people hanging after all that. I called the chief HR officer, which for my company is going over like 5 people's heads, but I did it with George's and my new boss's blessings, who is the head of HR, and asked why my attendance was an issue when I had reasonable ADA documentation. She had no idea what I was talking about, so I filled her in on all of it, including the mediation meeting and Aubrey's harassment and the HR director, her direct report, saying medical documentation didn't hold any weight with the company. She was speechless and asked to meet with me and my lawyer as soon as possible. My lawyer hardly had to do anything during the meeting because the CHRO was horrified at everything I told her. I've never actually seen steam come out of someone's ears, but if it was physically possible it would have happened here. My lawyer didn't need to say a word but just nodded and smiled when the CHRO offered an extended paid medical leave so I could handle my recovery and said Aubrey constantly sending me fitness plans would be dealt with swiftly. I didn't hear anything out of Aubrey for a long time, but I did hear through some gossip channels that the HR staff involved in the red flag meeting threatening to write me up were let go. Aubrey wasn't fired because they believed she was misled by HR, so I understand that part even if I don't agree with it, but she was on a tight PIP for a while. Then she showed up at my house. Now we move from banana pants to full-on banana ensembles. I'm still on leave and out of the blue, Aubrey showed up at my door on a weekend with 2 other women in tow and the commenters guessed it. She's in very deep with an MLM, or maybe a cult, I can't be sure at this point. Aubrey came over to demonstrate some workout techniques and give me some diet supplement samples and discuss a career opportunity, because she was worried about my physical and professional health. She didn't make it past my mother-in-law, who has been a godsend right now. My mother-in-law made it clear where Aubrey could stick her demonstration and they left in a hurry. I notified my lawyer and the CHRO, and suffice it to say, Aubrey is now a full-time wellness coach. I'm happy I went with my gut and got a lawyer because the company has changed so drastically over the last year, with the toxic HR department encouraging behavior like Aubrey's and spreading false information about medical leave and time off. The company is almost unrecognizable. Also, with my boss and mentor both gone, I don't know if I'm going to go back once I'm medically cleared. The company is also undergoing a restructuring right now, and my department may end up distributed between other parts of the company or even other parts of the state. I have been looking at jobs and doing some resume drafting for a full-time remote position since it feels like it might be a better fit. But many thanks to the comment section and all the support. Update 2. I got an offer from a local company that's going fully remote with administration and management meeting up once a month. The salary was right, it's 90% remote, it's a good fit, so I'm happy with it. My role is HR adjacent as head of payroll. I reported to the COO and was hired by the CEO and COO. I walked into our first admin meeting, and who was sitting across from me but the HR director, who told me medical documentation doesn't matter and orchestrated my red flag meeting. Let's call him Bob. Bob is the interim HR director for this company. Bob looked very uncomfortable when he saw me. We went through some employee files, including several who are on maternity leave and 2 who were injured on a job site. Bob got quieter as we began reviewing medical documentation and approving paid leave. I smiled and looked him in the eye every time I asked, "And does Jill have her medical documentation?" "Great. Medical documentation holds a lot of weight. That's important stuff to have." He looked like he wanted to melt into his seat. At one point he tried to argue against someone using their PTO to provide end-of-life care for a parent when they had ample PTO. I smiled and said, "You're right, our employee support fund should cover half this time. It's a shame for them to have to lose all their PTO when they're obviously going to need it to heal and grieve over the next few months. Why don't you get me the paperwork for the support fund this afternoon? That's so generous." Everyone was happy and in agreement. He looked like he swallowed a lemon, but everyone was like, "OMG Bob, how thoughtful." He had to eat it so bad and got me the documentation an hour later. Bob can suck it. Bob is also only a contractor, so he'll be moving on soon anyway. Medically I'm doing better, and very happy to move on from where I was. Aubrey's been full on radio silence, which is perfect for me. Thanks AAM team and commenters. My wife left for a month with the hot new neighbor. I filed for divorce. She tried to fix it, but I'm not a backup. I guess I'm writing this to get it out of my system. My name is Mike, I'm 31, and until lately, I felt I had my life under control. I've always been a simple guy, no big dreams, no crazy drama. I had a regular career as a software developer, a decent house in a quiet neighborhood, and, until recently, I believed I had a strong marriage with a woman I truly loved. Laura and I met almost 8 years ago. Looking back, it seems like a lifetime ago. I was 23, fresh out of college, working my first job, and frankly, naive about life. She was 22, working as an assistant at a marketing agency while trying to figure out her own career path. For the record, she never did and eventually became a stay-at-home wife. We met at a mutual friend's barbecue, one of those casual backyard gatherings when everyone is using cheap paper plates and someone is always burning the burgers. She approached me and made a snarky jest about how I appeared to be planning my escape. I can't recall my response, but she laughed, and we ended up talking for the rest of the evening. From then, everything went quickly. We started dating, and it felt like she gave some excitement to my otherwise mundane and routine life. Laura was adventurous and spontaneous, always planning last-minute road trips or bringing me to a new restaurant she had heard about. Meanwhile, I remained the grounded one. I'd be the one to figure out the budget, check the weather, and double-check the gas tank before we hit the road. It seems to work. We balance each other out. She brought excitement into my life, and I offered her the steadiness she stated she lacked in previous relationships. After 3 years of dating, we decided to get married. The wedding was intimate, with only relatives and close friends. We didn't come from wealthy households, so there was no grand ballroom or extravagant catering, but that didn't matter. After the wedding, we began to establish a life together. We purchased a little 2-bedroom house in a quiet suburb, not the fanciest location, but it had potential. For the most part, things seemed stable. When I got home from work, Laura was generally in the kitchen or on the couch, browsing through her phone. She would tell me stories from her day. She worked in marketing at the time, so there was always some drama with clients or coworkers, and I listened. This was our dynamic. She was the storyteller, and I was the listener. We did not have children, but it was a joint decision. Laura wasn't in a rush, and neither was I. We both preferred to wait until we were more financially stable and prepared for the next major step. We seemed to agree on the majority of issues. Looking back, I wonder if I became too comfortable. It's easy to get into a pattern, especially when life feels stable. I would get up, go to work, return home, and repeat. Of course, we had date nights, which usually consisted of supper at one of our favorite restaurants or a movie. But I believe I stopped noticing the small details, like how Laura seemed to thrive on attention. It wasn't too horrible, at least not at first. She's the type of person that can brighten a room, and people instinctively draw towards her. I guess I began to take her vitality and warmth for granted, expecting they were a continuous part of our lives together. At the moment, I wasn't concerned. I assumed we were solid. Sure, we had disagreements now and then, what marriage doesn't? Most of the time, it was about little matters, such as me forgetting to take out the garbage or her leaving her shoes scattered throughout the home. Nothing significant. But there's this issue about relationships. They can appear fine on the outside while cracks occur quietly underneath. If you don't pay attention, those cracks might expand and cause the entire foundation to crumble. I didn't see it coming, at least not then. I thought we were constructing something robust and long-lasting. But sometimes life has a way of proving you incorrect. Jake, a new character, entered our lives. Jake moved in next door when his former neighbors, an elderly couple, downsized and relocated to Florida. He was roughly 28 years old at the time, making him younger than the majority of the residents in the neighborhood. He was a personal trainer, fit, confident, and admittedly a little too attractive for his own good. He had the type of body that made people look twice, as if he had just stepped out of an action film. Jake was easy to notice from the moment he moved in. Not just because of his appearance, but because he was always outside doing something, washing his car, mowing the lawn, erecting a pull-up bar in his yard. There was always a reason for him to go shirtless. He quickly became the buzz of the neighborhood. Laura spotted him right away. How could she not? We first met Jake when he came over to introduce himself while we were in the yard one Saturday morning. He was pleasant, the type of person who could charm anyone. Laura started up a discussion with him almost immediately, asking where he was from, what he did for a living, and how he liked the neighborhood. I recall standing there, smiling and nodding, barely able to say anything while the two of them chatted like old friends. At the time, I didn't think much of it. Laura was outgoing, she spoke to everyone. She'd be just as chatty with the mailman or the guy at the hardware store. It never seemed to me that there was anything unusual about her interest in Jake. But, looking back, I can see the subtle alterations that occurred after that. It started with casual talks. Laura always found a cause to join Jake outside. At first, it was small tasks like getting the mail, watering the plants, and putting out the trash. However, these brief jobs invariably led to 10 or 15-minute conversations with Jake. I once arrived home from work and discovered them conversing in the driveway. Laura was holding a basket of laundry that she had been carrying to the garage, and Jake was lounging casually against his car, laughing at something she said. When I stepped up, they both turned to me, and Laura pretended it was no big deal. Jake was just telling me about his new gym equipment, she explained casually. It did not stop there. A few weeks later, Laura decided to bake cookies, which she hadn't done in months. I didn't think much of it until I noticed her heading across the yard, a dish of cookies in hand. Just being neighborly, she remarked when I asked her about it. I shrugged it off. Laura's behavior in this regard was not unique. She had previously brought brownies to other neighbors. But then there was the time she purchased a new set of training clothes. Bright, fitted leggings and a matching top, which was not something she would ordinarily wear. When I asked her about it, she said she was thinking about starting to jog again. You know, to get back into shape, she explained. I did not question it. Laura had previously gone through fitness phases in which she would become thrilled about working out for a month or two before losing interest. But this time, her timing was ideal. Jake jogged virtually every morning. I'd see him out there, headphones in, doing laps around the street. Laura determined her new jogging program would begin at the same time Jake was out there. I noticed them speaking on the sidewalk one morning as I was going for work. Laura was stretching, and Jake was showing her a way to avoid shin splints. I didn't say anything, just a short wave and drove away. But something in the scene stuck with me. Around this time, I saw Laura's phone habits change as well. She'd always been on her phone, reading around social media and contacting her buddies. But now she appeared wary. When I stepped into the room, she would swiftly lock her screen or flip her phone over, as if she didn't want me to see anything. One night, I observed her scrolling through Instagram, And when I looked over, I saw Jake's name at the top. She hastily swiped past it, but I saw enough to know she was looking at his profile. When I asked her about it, she brushed it aside. I was just checking out his fitness posts, she told me. He has some good workout advice. I wanted to believe her, so I let it go. But the small things kept stacking up. Another day, I was working in the garage and heard laughter coming from the backyard. I stepped outside to see Laura and Jake standing near the fence, laughing about something. Laura was holding an iced tea, and Jake was waving animatedly while telling a story. Laura waved at me as if nothing unusual had occurred. Jake was just telling me about this funny thing that happened at his gym, she explained later when I questioned about it. It was beginning to feel uncomfortable. I don't want to sound paranoid, but you can know when something is wrong. Laura's conversation about Jake had a new energy to it. She'd casually mention things he'd said or done, such as Jake's thinking about getting a dog, or Jake recommended this great protein shake. It wasn't what she was saying, but how she said it. Then there were the glances. You know what I mean. When we went outside and Jake was nearby, I noticed Laura take small glances in his direction. It was subtle, but once you notice it, you can't ignore it. At this moment I had yet to say anything. Part of me refused to think there was anything to worry about. Laura was someone I trusted. We had been together for years, and I thought we had a good relationship. But another part of me, the one that couldn't ignore the pattern, began to question. I chose to be quiet for now, but I began to pay closer attention. If something was happening, I had to witness it for myself. It was a Saturday morning, and I remember it vividly because it began off so typical. I got up early, as I always do, made myself a cup of coffee, and sat at the kitchen table, browsing through the news on my phone. Laura was still in bed, which was not surprising. She enjoyed her slow mornings, particularly on weekends. The house was silent, with only the humming of the coffee machine in the background, and for a brief minute, I felt peaceful. Funny how that works. You think everything is fine because you have no idea what's going to happen. Laura entered the kitchen around an hour later. She was in her pajamas, her hair all tangled from sleeping, holding her phone in one hand and massaging her eyes with the other. She sat across from me at the table, and I could tell something was up right away. She exuded nervous energy, drumming her fingers on the table and gazing at her phone as if she were avoiding eye contact. "Are you okay?" I inquired, setting down my phone. She nodded hastily before shaking her head. "Actually, no," she responded with a big sigh. "We need to talk." Anyone who has been in a relationship understands that those 4 words rarely mean anything good. My stomach knotted, but I tried to keep it cool. "All right," I murmured, reclining in my chair. "What's going on?" Laura paused, her gaze flitting around the room as if she was looking for the proper words. Finally, she looked at me and said, "I don't know how to say this, so I'm just going to say it. I think I have feelings for Jake." For a moment, I believed I had misheard her. "What?" I asked, leaning forward as if being closer would make the words more clear. She bit her lip, appearing really uncomfortable. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she said hurriedly, as if she wanted to avoid the response. "It just happened. I've been spending time with Jake, and I feel this connection, and now I'm confused." Confused. That word struck me more than anything else. She did not just express her guilt or admit that she had made a mistake. She expressed her confusion, as if she was trying to solve a puzzle. I stared at her, trying to understand what she was saying. My thoughts raced. Did she mention she wanted to leave? Is she asking for a divorce? Was she trying to confess and move on? I couldn't tell, and that made things worse. "So, what does this mean?" I inquired finally. "Are you saying you're done with us?" Laura shook her head rapidly. "No, not necessarily," she replied. I don't know what I want right now. I love you, Mike. I do, but I can't stop thinking about him, and I need to figure out what these feelings mean." I felt as if the floor had been torn out from beneath me. We'd been together for years, had established a life together, and now she said she wasn't sure she wanted to be with me anymore. It was surreal. I took a deep breath and tried to hold my voice steady. "So, what are you saying? You want to take a break?" She hesitated and then nodded. "Kind of," she responded. "I need time to figure things out. I was thinking maybe I could take a month to spend some time with Jake and see if there's something real there. If it doesn't work out, then we can focus on ourselves." I blinked, astounded by her audacity. "You're serious?" I asked, without even framing it as a question. Laura nodded, her gaze begging. "I know it sounds crazy, but I don't want to throw away what we have without being sure. I don't want to live with regrets, you know?" Regrets. The phrase lingered in my head like a splinter. She was talking about regrets as if she was the one putting everything on the line, as if my feelings were secondary to her life-changing decisions. I sat there, staring at her, a combination of rage and incredulity boiling beneath the surface. Part of me wanted to yell at her for being so selfish. But another part of me, perhaps the calmer, more calculated side, chose to remain silent and let her dig her own hole. "All right," I murmured, reclining back in my chair. Laura blinked, apparently taken off guard. "Wait, really?" "Sure," I replied, shrugging as if it were no great issue. "If you think that's what you need, go ahead." Her look flickered, as if she didn't know whether I was being real or mocking. "I just think it's the best way to figure out where my heart is," she admitted cautiously. "Sure," I replied. "Do what you need to do." Inside, I was already finished. When she mentioned she wanted to spend a month with another man, my brain flicked a switch. But I didn't want to show my cards yet. If she was willing to abandon our marriage for a dream with a neighbor, I was curious to see how far she would go. Laura let out a relieved sigh, as if she had just been given permission to accomplish something heroic. "Thank you," she replied, reaching across the table to touch my hand. "I know this is a lot to ask, but I really believe it's the right thing for us." I stood up and grabbed my coffee mug, pulling my hand away. "Sure," I repeated, my voice flat. "If that's what you need." She said nothing after that, simply sat there, most likely contemplating the fact that I wasn't arguing or fighting. But within, I was already planning. Laura spent the following few days packing a modest bag. She informed me she'd be staying with Jake, and she made it sound casual, as if it was simply a temporary arrangement. She didn't appear to realize that I wasn't asking inquiries or expressing any resistance. When Laura went, the house felt different. Not empty, but quieter, as if someone had turned down the volume on my life. I stood in the living room after she left, her duffel bag slung over her shoulder, and stared at the door. I expected to feel angry or heartbroken, but all I felt was a peculiar peace, as if the weight of pretending everything was fine had finally been lifted. I strolled into the kitchen, poured myself a drink of water, and stood there, trying to figure out what had just happened. My wife, whom I had been with for years and expected to spend my life with, had departed to figure things out with the guy next door. If it hadn't been my life, I would have assumed it was some insane TV drama. The first several days felt odd. I started noticing the little things she'd left behind. Her favorite cup on the kitchen counter, a pair of shoes near the entrance, and a blanket thrown over the back of the couch. I considered relocating them, but ultimately chose to leave them where they were, not because I missed her, but because I didn't want to waste energy. I poured myself into work, taking on extra assignments to fill my schedule. I stayed late at work not because I had to, but because I didn't want to return home to an empty house. When I wasn't working, I went to the gym frequently. I had never been a regular gym goer before, but there was something fulfilling about pushing myself physically, as if I could sweat out all of my stress. Friends began to realize that something was amiss. A few of them inquired as to why Laura was not present, and I responded vaguely. "She's staying with a friend for a while," I explained, attempting to sound casual. I wasn't ready to dive into the real tale yet. My father was the only one I spoke the truth to. I contacted him a few days after Laura left, and the first thing he asked was, "What's wrong?" He's always been able to read me, even over the phone. When I informed him what had happened, there was a prolonged delay on the other end of the call. Then he added, "Well, son, I hate to say it, but it sounds like you're better off without her." At first, I wasn't sure what to reply. I anticipated him to be more furious or ask more questions. But then he said something that remained with me. "If she doesn't know your worth, why should you wait around for her to figure it out?" He was correct. I'd spent so much time trying to understand Laura's decision and find out where I went wrong that I hadn't considered what I deserved. I wasn't just a backup plan in case her affair with Jake didn't work out. That night, I sat in the darkened living room, staring at the wedding photo on the mantel. We seemed so pleased in that image, so certain in our future. But now it simply felt like a reminder of all that had gone wrong. By the end of the week, I had made my decision. I was not going to sit around and wait for Laura to make her big decision. I was planning to make my own. The next day, I called a divorce attorney. Sitting in that lawyer's office felt weird. I detailed the scenario, attempting to maintain a steady voice, even though a part of me still couldn't believe it was true. The lawyer listened intently, nodding as I spoke, and when I finished, he replied, "You are well within your rights to file for divorce. This type of situation falls under irreconcilable differences." Hearing those words made things click in my head. Irreconcilable differences. This is what we would become. Laura and I weren't on the same page anymore, and perhaps we never had been. The lawyer guided me through the process, outlining what I needed to do and what I could expect. By the time I left his office, I had a strange sense of satisfaction, as if I had finally taken charge of my life. Back home, I began taking little efforts to prepare for the inevitable. I transferred some money to a second account in case things became ugly later. I walked through the house and began mentally partitioning what was mine and what was hers. I didn't touch her belongings yet. I figured I'd wait until things were official, but in my head, I was already planning how the house would look without her. The days stretched into weeks, and I grew accustomed to the stillness. It wasn't as horrible as I expected. In fact, it felt really tranquil. I didn't have to deal with Laura's continual chatter or the minor disagreements over trivial matters like whose turn it was to do the dishes. Meanwhile, I started hearing stuff through the grapevine. A neighbor reported seeing Laura and Jake at the park, looking cozy. Another person claimed to have seen them at a cafe downtown. I nodded and smiled, as if nothing bothered me, but inside I was filled with rage and pity. Anger because she had thrown away everything we owned for a fling with a boy who was unlikely to stick around. Pity, because I knew it wouldn't go well for her. Jake did not strike me as the sort to settle down, and Laura was about to find out the hard way. By the third week, I had stopped checking my phone for Laura's texts. I assumed if she wanted to communicate, she'd reach out, but I wasn't holding my breath. I was finished waiting for her. One night, while cleaning out the garage, I came upon a box of old photos from when Laura and I first met. For a brief period, I felt a stab of sadness as I remembered how happy we had been back then. But then I remembered all the subtle red signs I'd disregarded over the years, all the times I'd prioritized her demands over mine without even recognizing it. I closed and moved the box away. I didn't need those memories. Laura decided to make her spectacular reappearance almost exactly a month ago today. I had not heard anything from her during her brief trial with Jake. The few texts she sent were vague at best. "Hope you're doing okay," or "we'll chat when I get back." She didn't even try to keep me updated or pretend she was torn about her decision. It was as if she had already dismissed me as Plan B. By this point, I had ceased caring. I wasn't waiting by the door for her to come to her senses. I wasn't pacing the house, wondering what she and Jake were doing. I had filed for divorce, and my lawyer had already begun drafting the paperwork. As far as I was concerned, the marriage was ended. But I didn't tell her that just yet. When she went through the door, nothing seemed to have changed, at least for her. She had her bag draped over her shoulder, her hair nicely done, and a confident expression on her face, as if she'd just returned from a trip and was expecting me to roll out the red carpet. "Hey," she said, placing her luggage by the door. "I'm back." I was sitting on the couch, scrolling between channels and scarcely looking up. "Welcome back," I murmured, my tone remaining neutral. She paused, as if she was anticipating more of a response. When I didn't jump up or inquire how it went, she walked over and perched on the couch's arm. "We should talk," she stated quietly and carefully. I turned to face her and muted the TV. "All right," I replied, crossing my arms. "Talk." Laura smiled, the kind of smile she used when she was trying to make things better. "I've done a lot of thinking," she told me. "And I've realized some things. About myself. About us, about what I want." I simply nodded, waiting for her to continue. She took a big breath, as if she were ready to give an impassioned statement. "I care about you, Mike. I really do. And I think we can work through this. I think we can rebuild what we have." Rebuild. She stated it as if it were as simple as repairing a leaking faucet. I didn't say anything, simply looked at her, allowing her to fill the silence. She was perplexed by my silence, but she persisted. "Jake's a great guy," she remarked, and I had to bite my tongue to stop giggling at how casually she mentioned him. "But I realized he's not what I need. He's fun, sure, but he's immature. He doesn't have the stability that you have, and I think I was just caught up in the excitement of it all." There it was. Her big revelation. She tried out the shiny new toy and decided she liked the old one more. "Uh-huh," I replied, my voice cool. Laura blinked, as if she expected a more intense reply. "I know I've hurt you," she murmured, reaching out and touching my arm. "But I really believe we can get past this. We've been through so much together, Mike. We have history. That's not something you just throw away." I let her continue. I let her unload all of her perfectly practiced phrases about love, forgiveness, and beginning over. When she finished talking, I rose up and walked over to the kitchen counter. I unlocked a drawer, pulled out the divorce papers my lawyer had sent over, and placed them on the table in front of her. "What's this?" she inquired, her smile fading. "Divorce papers," I explained simply. Her face turned pallid. "You're kidding," she exclaimed, releasing a frightened laugh. Nope, I replied, leaning against the counter, arms folded. I'm not kidding. For a time, she stared at the papers, as if she couldn't believe what she saw. Then she glanced up at me with big eyes. You're divorcing me? Yeah, I said, my voice steady. I'm not interested in being your second choice, Laura. Her face went from shock to angry in an instant. Second choice? She demanded. That's not what this is. I was confused, Mike. I needed time to figure things out. And in the process, you decided to test the waters with another man, I added calmly. You left. You walked out on our marriage. And now you're back because it didn't work out with him. Do you honestly think I'm just going to take you back like nothing happened? Laura opened her mouth to argue before closing it again, her face growing red. It's not like that, she responded, her voice quivering. I was trying to do the right thing. I didn't want to stay and resent you. I thought. She trailed off, her gaze darting across the room. You thought you could have it both ways, I said for her. She stood up and crossed her arms. You're making a mistake, Mike. We can fix this. I know we can. No, I replied firmly. We can't. You made your choice, and now I'm making mine. She appeared to be about to cry, but I didn't let that affect me. I had already made up my mind. The remainder of the conversation was a haze. She tried to argue and guilt me into altering my mind. She discussed our history, our home, and even the possibility of starting a family someday. But nothing worked. Finally, she stormed out of the house. I stood there for a time, staring at the empty area where she had been, without feeling anything. No sadness, no regret, no second thoughts, only relief. Later that night, I called my lawyer to inform him that Laura had seen the paperwork. He said, "How'd she take it?" "Not great," I remarked, smirking. "Do you want to give her time to process, or should we move forward?" Move forward, I instructed without hesitation. It wasn't easy standing up to Laura, but it was ultimately the correct thing to do. She viewed me as a backup plan in case her fling didn't work out. And if she believed I'd take it, she obviously didn't know me as well as she imagined. I knew she would not give up easily. Laura was not the sort to simply walk away from a confrontation, especially one in which she thought she was losing. I'd hardly sat down when my phone buzzed with a text from her. "This isn't over." I gazed at the message for a second before locking my phone and throwing it on the couch. She was correct, it was not over. Not yet. But it would happen soon enough. The following several days were eventful, to say the least. Laura arrived unannounced the next evening, beating on the door as if she were attempting to break it down. "Mike, open the door," she exclaimed. I opened it, keeping a bland attitude. "What do you want, Laura?" She rushed by me and stormed into the living room, as if she still lived there. "We need to talk," she stated, pacing back and forth. "You can't just file for divorce without giving me a chance to fix things." I leaned against the doorframe and crossed my arms. "You had your chance," I replied quietly. "You made your decision when you left." "That's not fair," she responded, her voice rising. "I didn't leave to end our marriage, I left to figure things out, to make sure I wasn't making a mistake by staying." I could not help but laugh dryly. "And in doing that, you proved you didn't value what we had. You don't test a marriage by running off to someone else, Laura. That's not how it works." She paused pacing and turned to face me, her eyes blazing with frustration. "I was confused," she remarked, her voice shaking. "I didn't know what I wanted, but I know now. I want us, Mike. I want to fix this." "Too late," I replied, my tone strong. "You don't get to come back now just because things didn't work out with Jake." Her face contorted in rage, and she aimed a finger at me. "You're being petty," she said. "You're throwing away everything we built over one mistake." I shook my head, maintaining my composure. "It wasn't just one mistake, Laura. It was a series of choices. You chose to flirt with Jake. You chose to prioritize your feelings for him over our marriage. And then you chose to leave. Those weren't accidents, they were decisions." She opened her lips to argue, but then stopped, her shoulders sagging. For the first time, she appeared defeated. "What am I supposed to do now?" she inquired quietly. I sighed, feeling pity for her, despite everything she had done. "That's not my problem anymore," I explained. "You made your choices. Now you have to live with them." She waited for another minute, looking as if she wanted to say anything else, but then she walked out without saying anything. Following that, the divorce proceedings went fast. Laura attempted to drag things out at first, perhaps expecting I would change my mind. She even tried to play the victim in front of our mutual acquaintances, accusing me of being cold and cruel. My father, on the other hand, was completely on my side. When I told him about the scenario, he let out a low whistle. "She's got some nerve," he commented. "But I'm proud of you, son. Standing your ground isn't easy, but it's the right thing to do." Laura's stalling tactics proved ineffective. My lawyer was sharp, and the proof of her leaving for Jake made things quite clear. She attempted to plead for spousal support, stating she had given up her profession for the marriage, but the judge did not buy it. Finally, we reached a reasonable deal. She received a modest sum of money and some of the furniture she'd chosen, but I kept the house and the most of my savings. It was not ideal, but it was better than I had anticipated. The final hearing was bittersweet. Sitting in that courtroom, signing the documents that would officially end our marriage, felt strange. I glanced across at Laura a few times. She appeared exhausted, as if she hadn't slept in days. Her lawyer handed her a pen, and for a brief minute, I assumed she was not going to sign. But eventually, she scribbled her name at the bottom of the sheet, completing the transaction. Following the hearing, she approached me in the hallway. "Mike," she spoke softly, just above a whisper. "I'm sorry for everything." I stared at her, hoping to recognize the person I'd fallen in love with all those years ago, but all I saw was someone I used to know. "I know you are," I replied. "But sorry doesn't fix this." Her eyes welled up with tears, and she reached out to hug me, but I pulled aside. "Take care of yourself, Laura," I whispered, starting to walk away. I'd occasionally hear tidbits about Laura through the grapevine. Jake obviously moved on to someone else shortly after she returned to me. According to one common friend, she was currently living with a relative and figuring out her next moves. I didn't feel satisfied hearing about her problems, but I also didn't feel sorry for her. She had made her decisions, and now she was dealing with the consequences. One day, I ran into her at the supermarket. We locked eyes briefly, and I could see remorse written all over her face. She gave me a little hesitant wave, but I simply nodded and moved past. There was nothing more to say. Looking back, I don't regret how I handled situations. Laura believed she could have it both ways. She could go, pursue her feelings for someone else, then return to me if it didn't work out. But life does not operate that way. I've learned a lot about myself along this process. I realize now that I deserve someone who cherishes me and does not consider me as a last resort. And if that individual is out there, fantastic. If not, that's okay too. For the time being, my primary goal is to reconstruct my life on my own terms. Laura's trial run with Jake may have been her way of gaining clarity, but it was a wake-up call I didn't realize I needed.
Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.